The fan favorite map Ragnarok has recently been released on Ark Survival Ascended with not only a graphic overhaul, but also all new areas to explore, new creatures to tame like the beefy bison, and a brand new boss to take out in the form of a giant ice wyvern named Nunatek. Not only will I be challenging myself with surviving 100 days on the map and taking out the boss, but I'll also be building a base worthy of a Viking king. Will I conquer these lands or will they conquer me? Let's find out. I woke nearly naked in the sand with the gentle sound of waves crashing on the shore. Nearby I spotted a family of turtles shuffling about. Mixed in with them was a family of clumsy dodo birds. Then on the edge of the waters, some weathered crates caught my eye. I tried prying them open, but my hands just weren't strong enough. I would need tools, and so I started gathering the usual supplies, until the device in my wrist beeped, alerting me to the first quest of the new skill tree feature from the Lost Colony DLC. It wanted me to gather 2,500 berries, but for now, I only wanted to get those crates open. So after collecting a few stones off the beach, I crafted my first stone pickaxe and cracked open the nearest crate like it owed me money.
Yo, a pike already. That's crazy. And stone arrows. There's so many of them too. Look at all these boxes.
Look at all those
Boxes. A crossbow already? This is ridiculous. Oh, metal hatchet. There it is. That's what I've been looking for, a metal hatchet.
I continued breaking boxes, and with an arsenal of surprisingly good gear in hand, I checked my wrist again. Completing tasks earned skill points, which can be spent on skills. One was to adopt 3 wild babies, so when I found a dodo family, I did what any aspiring Viking would do. I took out the parents and claimed the children, completing the task. And I promptly took out the babies too. Next, I fashioned some cloth armor to protect my bare skin. Then while gathering fiber to complete the set, I witnessed a dillo chasing a dodo. Overtaken by guilt for what I had done to those babies, I stepped in to save the little bird. Then I used the fiber I'd gathered to complete my set of cloth armor, but seeing as I'm going for a Viking vibe, I restitched it with a more rugged look. Now dressed like a true warrior, I headed up the coast where I spotted a moss chops just across a shallow stretch of water. And I was in luck as this one only wanted cooked prime meat. So I gathered some wood and stone in preparation for making a campfire when another moss chops wandered onto the scene. Unfortunately, it wanted a rare flower for taming and I had none. So I built my campfire and began cooking some of the prime meat I had left over from the baby dodos. But the meat spoiled faster than my will to live, and so I spent the rest of the night lurking up and down the beaches in search of more babies to butcher for prime meat. Instead, I found only childless bachelors and bachelorettes enjoying their stress-free lifestyle. Back at the campfire with no prime meat, I began cooking normal meat for myself. That's when a pack of compies decided I looked like breakfast. I fought them off and in the chaos discovered a baby dodo had been here the whole time.
Oh, this one has a baby.
I chased it into the bush, harvested its prime meat, and once the meat finished cooking, I pulled it off the fire and fed the moss chops. Joining my team first was Stumpy. With Stumpy, I started berry gathering to finally complete the task of gathering 2,500 berries. Midway through, I took a break to gather a metal rock I had spotted, then jumped back into the berry grind. But this grew boring, and I pivoted to chasing pteranodons instead. The first one wasn't worth my time, so I traveled up the beach some, where I spotted another pteranodon gliding across the sky. While I waited for it to land, I crafted some bolos I would need for tying it up. Unfortunately, this pteranodon was determined to never land again, leaving me just looking up at its underside. Instead of waiting, I set off further up the beach towards another pteranodon I had seen landing. But as I began to approach, I noticed a dirty pego nearby, who despite me sending an arrow straight into its skull, would lunge at me, stealing my cooked meat. I chased it down and killed it eventually, but as I did, the pteranodon had lifted off into the sky.
And of course it takes off. Oh my gosh.
Thankfully, the one who had previously mocked me from the sky above had now landed on the shore, and this one was strong enough to make for a good tame.
115. Okay, that's good. I'll take that. Let's get to work.
I returned to where I had tamed the moss chops, dropped down a thatch foundation, and a mortar and pestle on top of that. Inside, I grinded together meat that had spoiled in my pockets, and narco berries I had gathered with Stumpy, creating a sleep-inducing narcotic. But while waiting for those to finish brewing, I noticed the pteranodon had once again made for the sky. So instead of standing around waiting, I split more meat to begin spoiling, and went back to gathering berries until eventually I completed the second task in my skill list, with the third task being to harvest 250 raw meat. So of course, I became immediately distracted with wiping out everything I found to begin harvesting that raw meat. One bastard bird would try stopping my massacre by dislodging my pike from my hands, but I took it down with one well-placed arrow. Then I picked a fight with a turtle who would end up being a much tougher fight than I imagined, pushing me slowly back up the beach as it relentlessly pursued me. And between its bites and the cold front passing over the beach, I nearly died before landing a final arrow that took the turtle down. Back at camp, I got some more narcotics brewing, gathered a ton more stone, which I used to craft a refining forge that I would add to my thatch pad, and inside it I began cooking the metal I had gathered previously. seriously. While that cooked, I began lacing arrows with narcotic to create what I call sleepy sticks. As those finished, so did enough metal to craft a smithy. I added it to the pad and used it to craft the one metal tool I didn't get from the boxes, a metal pickaxe. Of course, in gathering the meat, I also gathered a good amount of hide, and so I used that to upgrade my cloth armor to hide. Then, as a red haze took over the sky, I began stalking another Pteranodon who soared high above, bolas in hand, ready to tie it up should it fly too low. Eventually it would, and I would sling a bola onto its feet, dropping the beast down to the sands below. But it wasn't quite strong enough to tame, and so I added its meat to the counter instead. Nearby I spotted another one hugging tight to the hilltop, and despite my short stature, I had little issue scaling the side of the cliff to reach it. It would land on the side of the hill, and as I began trying to figure out how I would make the jump over to it, it just sort of wandered off the side of the hill, falling to the ground below. I followed it down, hit it with a bola, and knocked it out with 2 quick arrows to the head. The next morning I spotted another Pteranodon drifting a little too close to the ground. With a bola ready, I tied it up to see if it might be a worthy upgrade, but it wasn't, and so I relieved it of its burdens. With no better options, I resigned myself to the unconscious bird I already had waiting for me, but it still needed prime meat, so I set off inland, carving a bloody path through anything foolish enough to cross me, partially to find something juicy and partially to keep ticking away at the raw meat quota for the 3rd skill task. Eventually I found a dodo with a baby trailing close behind, a perfect sacrifice. Not only did I secure the prime meat I needed, I also hit the milestone of 250 raw meat, completing my 3rd task. My reward, 3 shiny skill points, which I immediately invested into hot-blooded, giving me a 300% boost to natural health regeneration. With prime meat in hand, I began scaling the side of a cliff to get back to my downed Pteranodon. The ground ran out fast, so I dove headfirst into the waters below, not knowing what nightmares might be waiting in the deep. Fortunately, it was quiet. I emerged on the other side and reached my unconscious sky beast, fed it the prime meat, and just like that, it tamed instantly. But I couldn't craft a saddle for it just yet, so for now, my Pteranodon would follow me as we trekked back to what we're generously calling base. Once home, I named her Autumn. While here, I split more meat to get it spoiling for future narcotic crafting, and then I set out to gather wood. Coincidentally, this was also my next skill task, so it was a double win. The wood went into crafting a large storage box, something I desperately needed to store all of my Viking plunder. Then it was time for another berry run with Stumpy, but just as we were getting into the rhythm of things, 2 pagos leapt out of nowhere and started harassing my moss chops. I dismounted and fought them off myself. Stumpy ran, and one pago chased him down while the other danced around me. I chased it through the brush, hiking it at every chance. When I returned, I discovered that Autumn had swooped in to defend Stumpy, and I helped finish the fight with a clean arrow to the pago's face. With that crisis behind us, I went back to berry gathering, but Stumpy wasn't cutting it. So I crossed the water in search of a replacement and found a small herd of parasaurs. Before I could begin the taming process, another Ichthyornis dived-bombed me and made off with a mouthful of the narcoberries Stumpy had worked so hard to gather. 1 arrow later, and revenge was mine. I hit the better of the 2 parasaurs with a bola and knocked it out cleanly. Then I returned to Stumpy to scoop up the berries needed to feed my future berry farmer. With the taming underway, I took the time to craft its saddle. While the parasaur tamed, I went hunting for something a bit tougher. Turtles. Their shells contain keratin, a key resource I'd need to craft a saddle for Autumn. I found one and took the high ground, peppering it with arrows from atop a rock. It wasn't long before it climbed up to me, and we started dancing around the summit. Me swinging my pike, it chomping at the air. Mid-fight, the turtle shoved me off the rock and cracked my pike against its shell, but with a final swing of my metal hatchet, the beast fell. I harvested it and walked away with a grand total of 9 keratin. Not exactly rich, but it was a start. On the bright side, the parasaur finished taming. I saddled it up and rode it home, naming it Brain Rot. And Brain Rot went straight to work gathering berries. We turned those into narcotics, and the experience from all of the chemistry gave me the final few levels I needed to unlock the Pteranodon saddle. The next day began with arrow crafting and a fresh crossbow strapped across my back. With gear in hand, I saddled up on Brain Rot and headed into the jungle, carefully crossing over fallen trees. Eventually, I reached a quiet little cove. I'd hoped to find trilobites lazily sunbathing on the shore like crusty little treasure chests, but the beach was empty, so it was plan B, bug hunting. I dove into the trees, eyes peeled for the skittering of giant insects, when I spotted something even better. Deeper in the jungle stood a raptor, a much better exploring mount than poor Brain Rot. I loaded up a trank arrow into my bow, ready to bola, and dismounted, instructing Brain Rot to stay back and watch the chaos unfold. The raptor had just finished its own breakfast when it saw me and charged. I hit it clean with a bola, but as it began loading arrows, a rogue Dilophosaur decided to crash the party. I knocked out the raptor and then made quick work of the Dillo with a few jabs of my pike. Then it caught my eye, the beauty of the sunlight filtering through the jungle canopy. I paused for a moment moment just to take it all in. But beauty never lasts long here. There were some nearby baby parasaurs, and I needed prime meat for the raptor. This was a prime opportunity. I took down the mother first, then followed it up by harvesting one of her children. The fresh prime meat went straight into the sleeping raptor's belly. Just as I was checking its saddle requirements, the beast tamed, and all I needed now was fiber. An easy grab from a nearby underbrush, I crafted the saddle, mounted up, and immediately realized the raptor was not up for the task of hauling my glorious Viking frame. Still, I named it Velocity. Velocity followed behind as I rode Brainrot to a nearby purple loot drop. I cracked it open, and what I found inside was a real game changer. There we go. Oh my god! An Ascended Pump Shotgun already! I got an Ascended Pump Shotgun on day 4. That's awesome. I'm literally crying. That's crazy. On the way back, we came across a small, narrow water crossing, and I thought to myself, surely we could cross this with no trouble. We did get back to base eventually, and I swapped Brainrot out for Velocity and tore back into the jungle, now officially on the hunt for chitin-rich victims. My jungle sweep didn't yield any bugs at first, but I did stumble across a future Ankylosaurus I made a mental note of. The club-tailed beast would be useful later. The search continued until I found a species X plant and grabbed a few seeds. Just then, I spotted a fleeing Moschops followed closely by a panicked oviraptor. It was a parent, and where there's a parent in distress, there's usually a vulnerable baby nearby. This was a great opportunity. I engaged the oviraptor, and she shoved me down a hillside in desperation. We tumbled, clawed, and rolled until finally she collapsed. I scrambled back up the hill only to find the baby was gone, vanished into the jungle like a ghost. But the gods were not finished testing me. Moments later, I found a swarm of giant dragonflies. I tore through them easily, but recovering their twitchy little bodies in the thick undergrowth was another challenge entirely. And even after harvesting them, I was still short on chitin and keratin, so I turned back to turtles. I leapt across a small clearing and landed in the middle of a turtle family dispute. Velocity tore through the mother, and I finished off the child with my pike. The keratin combined with the chitin from earlier would be just enough for what I had in mind. Back home, I dug through my storage and grabbed what keratin I had stashed earlier, only to realize I was still short on hide for crafting Autumn's saddle. So I saddled up Velocity once more and rode off into the wild in search of more victims. The search wouldn't take long at all, as I would find the other parasaur we saw earlier still across the water from our base, and I would quickly take it out. With enough hide finally gathered, I crafted the saddle I'd been working toward, rushed home, and slapped it onto Autumn's back, and for the first time, took to the skies. We soared upward into the sky as a storm brewed in the distance. My destination, the jagged mountain peaks. My only goal, crystal. Once I reached the summit, I pried the shimmering gems from the ground and crafted my first spyglass. A Viking needs to know what beasts lie ahead before he dives in head first. I gathered a bit more for later, just to be safe, and then left the mountaintop behind. Next, I scouted nearby beaches in search of more Moschops. Their future eggs would be crucial down the line, and planning ahead was critical to my success. While combing the jungles for Moschops, I stumbled across a hidden cave entrance just above the waterline. It opened into a serene cavern that was stunning. For a moment, I forgot I was here to survive and just took it in. Before leaving, I mined some metal from a rock tucked inside, a little gift for making the trip. Climbing out through a crack in the cave ceiling, I emerged at a lake tucked quietly above it. The peace didn't last though. On one side of the lake stood a Rex, and on the other, a Therizinosaurus. And just as I landed to recover stamina, a Spino slinked out of the trees like a scene straight from a movie. That Spino, though, might prove useful later. But first, my exploration continued, this time toward a massive bay area where I spotted a herd of Dinotherium patrolling near the bones of some long-dead predator. Then I saw it, a waterfall with a mysterious opening behind it. Naturally, I flew straight in, finding another cave. Peaceful, secluded, the kind of place a Viking might one day call home. But more importantly, this one held strange pink plants. When I harvested them, I discovered they were loaded with organic polymer, a resource I would need if I ever wanted to craft cryopods. I harvested until I could barely carry myself, and then climbed back onto Autumn, weighed down but victorious. Back at the bay, I perched her on a rock in the middle of the water and dove beneath the surface. Below me lay jagged black oil rocks, exactly what I needed. I surfaced for a breath, drew my pickaxe, and dove again.
Swim, daddy, swim. Swim, buddy. Come on, get this oil. There we go. Oh yeah, that's it right there. That's the oil we want. Oh yeah, baby. America. That's what I'm talking about.
With oil and polymer pouring out of my pockets, I returned to base to drop off the materials. While there, I built a second storage box as I was running out of space fast. I got the metal smelting in the forge and armed myself with a fresh crossbow for my next plan. Cryopods were within reach, but I needed just a few more levels, and nothing says experience quite like taking down a Spino, and I knew exactly where one was. When I arrived, the Spino was locked in combat with the Therizinosaurus. Time was short. I landed on him nearby, jumped off, and began loosing arrows into the chaos. The first few struck the the Therizino by accident, but then one final arrow buried itself deep into the Spino's hide, securing me the kill. I turned my attention to the Therizino, but quickly realized that sticking around would be a terrible idea. So I did the smart thing, claimed my one victory, and got out. And what a victory it was. Slaying the Spino gave me the levels I needed. The cryopod engram unlocked at last. I returned home ready to start crafting, and once again realized I was short on hide. So it was back to the skies on autumn, searching for unsuspecting victims. I found a group of parasaurs wedged between some rocks, but as I began my assault, they broke free and ran. Eventually, I ran one down and took it out. Then I spotted another unrelated parasaur nearby. Took it down too, as well as its baby. By the time I was done, I had more than enough hide to finish crafting the cryopods. Once home, I gathered everything I needed out of storage and finally crafted my first batch of cryopods. As usual, I used the Pelayori's cryo storage mod, because not only does it let me freeze my dinos like prehistoric TV dinners, but it also lets me check their stats once frozen, which is crucial when you're raising a genetically elite dino army. So with cryos now in hand, I set out in autumn again to resume my mission of taming an army of female Moschops as well as one lucky male. After scouring a stretch of beach, I finally spotted two Moschops meandering near the shore. Sadly, both were males, and both were picky. One wanted a rare flower, and the other a rare mushroom. Naturally, I had neither. I figured I might be able to scavenge some mushrooms off of the nearby crystal nodes, but I'd already stripped the area clean. So the search continued deeper into the bay, and that's when I saw it. Another oviraptor parent strutting along with a tiny baby in tow. I struck fast, took out the parent, and this time I claimed the baby without issue.
Got it. Sweet. Baby oviraptor acquired. I don't even care about that pego. Boom, we got ourselves an oviraptor. Okay, sweet. Now we just gotta let it raise.
Still hoping to find mushrooms, I stopped at another cluster of crystal, and just as I landed, I spotted another male Moschops. This one with a simple request, a mejoberry. Nearby, another male was asking for prime fish meat, which was, well, less easy. So I picked a few mejos and offered one to the first Moschops, nearly taming it with a single bite. While I waited for it to get hungry again, I started cracking into the crystal, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone. Out of the fog, a Therizino loomed. My peaceful Moschops tame quickly became a race to get it complete before the Theri interfered. To kill time and to avoid making eye contact with Mr. Freddy Krueger claws, I started gathering wood, as the first task for earning my next set of skill points was to gather 1,000 pieces of it. Eventually, the Moschops was ready for another round. He wanted another mejoberry, which I plucked from a nearby bush and fed him, securing the tame. The Moschop search continued from there well into the night. Somewhere in the darkness of the jungle, I spotted a female Moschops, a rare sight in these testosterone-infested lands. But of course, she wanted giant bee honey, and I had none. So with only the male Moschops and the baby oviraptor to show for my trouble, I returned home under the moonlight. Still, I had my Moschop stud, who I named Hugh. I paired him up with Stumpy and let the Dumpy Bumpy commence. Soon enough, we'd be up to our knees in Moschop's eggs. While the two lovebirds got busy, I brought out the baby oviraptor, my little orphaned klepto, and made sure it had food. I wasn't about to lose it to starvation after all of that effort. Then I shifted gears and returned to a far less exciting task, chopping wood. Lots of it. After grinding out 1,000 pieces, the skill task was complete. That unlocked another task, gather 1,000 thatch, because nothing says Viking conquest like endless gathering. Thankfully, that went a lot faster, and then something else caught my attention, an egg. My Moschops had delivered. I crafted a preserving bin on the spot, set it down next to my storage racks, and rushed to get spark powder going in the mortar and pestle. Once the preserving bin was prepped, I grabbed the egg, which admittedly I had almost forgotten, and I tossed it in before it spoiled. With the extra materials I'd gathered, I crafted 10 wooden fence foundations to complete the next skill task of building 10 wooden structures. Once done, I used the points to unlock all 3 tiers of Experienced Killer, a passive skill that boosts my mount's XP gains up to 30% for kills. Feeling good, I rode back out on the hunt for more Moschops. The picky female from the previous night had changed her mind and now wanted a rare flower, which of course I still had none of. So the search continued until I found another female who simply wanted a Tinto berry. Finally, a reasonable Moschops. I fed her, then while waiting for her to get hungry again, I got started on my next big grind, 1,000 stone. Before I could finish, she was hungry again, this time for a mejoberry. I picked a few and fed her. That sealed the deal, another Moschops added to the tribe. Still needing more females for my egg factory, I returned to the coast and pushed further up. That's when I had a signature moment. Autumn ran out of stamina and began to slowly descend to the ground. Like clockwork, an ichthyornis swooped in, taking advantage of me in my moment of weakness. I dismounted, loosed an arrow into it, followed by another, dropping the flying rat. But that gave me an idea. Far off in the swamp, I could see the outline of a castle, ancient and overgrown. I knew in that moment that was where I needed to go next, because what lived in that castle could put an end to all of my future seagull problems. On the way there, I spotted spotted a glowing light unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was one of the brand new Drakeling creatures, but as I observed it, something more important caught my eye. A pack of raptors tearing into an ovis just below. The poor thing was already dead, so I swooped in with Autumn to carve off a slice of mutton for myself, which seemed to anger the glowing Drakeling. Regardless, I continued my mission to the swamp castle, and as I approached the entrance, there they were. Cats. Yes, regular old house cats, an odd find in this prehistoric world. One curious feline wandered out from the entrance, but I startled it and it bolted into the underbrush. I quickly scooped it up with Autumn and carried it to the top of the castle tower, away from danger. At first, the cat was nervous, shy, and mistrustful, but with patience, I held out a piece of raw mutton, and sure enough, it ate straight from my hand. Early into the next morning, my little feline friend nibbled away at a second helping of lamb, and not long after that, one final piece cemented our friendship. Kitty Softpaws joined the team. Since I was already waist deep in danger and mosquitoes, I figured I'd take a stroll through the swamp in search of rare flowers. But of course, the place was crawling with the usual murky water murderers. Eventually, I found a small chunk of land, an oasis tucked into the edge of the swamp, absolutely packed with flowers and guarded by only a single titanoboa. I took out the snake and started harvesting flowers like a man with a goal of opening his own flower shop. With my pockets full and smelling wonderful, I flew back to the picky female moss chops who'd been waiting for them since yesterday. I gave her the first feed and waited for her to hunger again, but in the meantime, I returned to the ever-thrilling job of mining stone. It took a while, but finally the task of gathering 1,000 stone was complete. Just in time too, Moss Chops number 3 wanted another flower. I fed it to her, and just like that, she joined the tribe. One more willing participant for the egg factory. With that, I set my sights on my next skill task, craft 100 stone arrows. I gathered some flint and wood and got to work, only to realize, of course, I was short on thatch. So I ran back out, grabbed what I needed, and wrapped up the arrow crafting shortly after. From there, I headed back out to continue my Moss Chop search when I learned the hard way that I'd forgotten to activate Kitty Softpaw's anti-theft ability.
Yeah, piss off, you bastard. Wait, did it still take something from me? It shouldn't come after me. The cat should scare it. Oi, that cat!
Then, before I could find any more Moss Chops, I spotted something better. A high-level Argentavis soaring above the mountains. I flew up close with Autumn, giving the Argent a front-row view to my meaty BBL. It, of course, couldn't resist and followed me to a nearby cliff, where I would sink an arrow straight into its face, and the battle was on. It flew at me, slashing and pecking as I stood my ground, tanking hits and firing arrows. Eventually, it turned its sights on Autumn, and I continued pelting with tranks until finally it fled, bloodied and woozy. I gave chase, firing arrows when I could, then one final long-distance volley landed in its back, dropping the bird dangerously close to the water. Luckily, it landed just out of the water, and even luckier, it landed right next to some wandering baby dodos. I did what had to be done. Taking the babies out for their prime meat, I would feed to my new Argent friend, but I wasn't sure it'd be enough, so I found another baby dodo nearby and repeated the process. While the Argent tamed, I flew home to name my 2 new lady Moss Chops, Lumpy and Bumpy. Naturally, I parked them next to Hugh and set them to work making me more eggs. As the next day began, we were back on the grind. While here at base, I kicked things off by crafting thatch half walls, 25 of them to be exact, to knock out the next skill point task. They finished up as I dug through my ever-growing chaos pile of storage bins, which unlocked 3 more skill points. Before spending them, I queued up the next task, crafting 25 trank arrows, but honestly, it never hurts to have more sleepy sticks in your arsenal, so this was a double win. Once that was running, I cashed in the skill points on something I'd had my eye on, Bonded Taming. It gives your tames a 10% imprint bonus from just taming them. Problem is, it costs 2 points per tier, so I could only unlock 1 level for now. Before heading out again, I scooped up 2 fresh Moss Chops eggs from the newest recruits and tucked them safely into cold storage. Then on my way out, I snagged a blue drop that was very close to being legendary.
I don't remember if it's cooked meat jerky or if it's, I think it's prime meat. I don't think it's cooked prime meat or prime, yeah, I think it's prime meat jerky for superior kibble. If it was cooked, that would be pretty funny, but I think it's prime.
Still waiting on my Argentavis to finish taming, I kept myself busy by tackling the next skill task, harvesting 25 prime meat. To start, I picked a fight with a mama trike and her baby. Eventually, Autumn would take the mother down, and we harvested the baby for our first bit of prime meat. Just after that, my new Argentavis finally finished taming. We headed home, and on the way, I kept my eyes peeled for more easy targets. I found several baby dinos wandering too far from their parents, and one by one, they fell to Autumn, pushing me over the 25 prime meat mark to finish the task. Next up was to tame a Dilo with over 90% effectiveness. Lucky for me, a lone one was nearby. I knocked it out and gave it some of that fresh prime meat, which did the trick almost instantly, and with that, 3 more skill points were unlocked. But first, I named my newest member, Sergeant Spitz. With those 3 more points, I now had 4 total, so I maxed out Bonded Taming, unlocking the final 2 tiers. To my relief, the task list didn't reset for some reason, which meant my next reward was just 1 tame away, a Lystrosaurus. And wouldn't you know it, I remembered spotting a Lystro family not far from where I tamed the Dillo. I returned, took out the mother, and claimed one of the babies as my own. With that tame, I got my 3 points, and then promptly disposed of the Lystro. It wasn't personal, I just had no use for it. Once back at base, I named my new bird Spooky. But I still needed 1 more level to unlock Spooky's saddle, so I fired up the old reliable method of crafting cooking pots. It worked, I hit level 62 and immediately unlocked the saddle. Only problem, I was short on both chitin and hide. Instead of sulking, I turned to crafting a feeding trough, filled it with a little meat and berries, and scooped up 1 more moss chop egg off the soft sand. As the day turned over, I set out looking for bugs. I needed chitin, and that meant any creepy crawler had to go. That's when I stumbled on something unsettling. A creepy little cave tucked away in the wilderness like it was waiting to be discovered or to never be found again.
The heck is this room? This is a freaking torture chamber. Oh my god. This guy has been put through it, my lord. You poor, poor man. What sick fuck lived here?
Shaking that off, I headed towards the mountain behind the bay, figuring I'd find a nice crop of chitin-rich scorpions there. On the way, I spotted a high-level Doedicurus, a perfect future tame, but not today. Just then, a red ring drop caught my eye. Nearby, a scorpion and Kentril were locked in mortal combat. I swooped in and grabbed the loot as they battled, a set of riot gear and a sniper rifle. Now that was a find. One day, that rifle might just save my life. With that loot in hand, I took out the scorpion and then began trying to take out the Kentro. But as I did, an Argentavis swooped in and stole the chitin right off the scorpion. Naturally, I decided to kill it out of spite. That was a mistake. It nearly destroyed all of my armor, but thanks to the drop, I had some high quality replacements ready to go. Having a hunger for loot, I veered off course towards the snow-covered mountain to investigate a yellow ring drop. While I waited, I noticed a few ice wyverns circling above a massive rock, and right there, glowing in the daylight, sat one of their eggs.
There's ice wyverns, which means there's oh, there is a nest right there. Oh, we're getting an egg. We're getting an egg right now. Why not, man? I'm gonna wait for this drop and then I'm gonna go get that egg.
The yellow drop finally came down, and inside of it was a nice Anki saddle and a sickle. Useful, but not as tempting as that wyvern nest. I couldn't resist, and that was a bad idea. I barely got close before the wyvern spotted me. I bolted, hoping something else would grab their aggro. One peeled off, but the other, not so much. It pinned me against a tree, and Autumn was out of stamina and bleeding out fast. Then I remembered I was wearing riot gear and carrying a high-power rifle. I bailed off of Autumn, planted my feet, and started firing. I missed a lot, but the shots that hit, they mattered.
I'll leave my train alone. Got it. Oh my gosh. Oh, Autumn! Autumn, you're so bloody! Autumn, I missed so many shots. I'm so sorry. That should not have even gotten that close. You sweet, sweet, beautiful child. Holy crap.
On the way out, I finally found what I came for. Scorpions on the side of a mountain. Autumn was in no condition to fight, so I jumped off and used my bow. When one got too close, I switched to the pike, but the scorpion wanted Autumn. I jumped back on her and finished the fight, then harvested the chitin with my hatchet. One more scorpion came my way, I softened it up with an arrow, finished it off with a pike, and with the final harvest, I had all the chitin I needed. When I got back home, I was greeted by a new face, my now fully raised Oviraptor, and I named him Fluffer. All that was left now for Spooky's saddle was some hide. A wandering parasaur and a dillo later, and I had enough. Except that I forgot the fiber at base. So there I was, hand-picking bushes as I waited for a purple drop to land. When it did, I had a flicker of hope that maybe it would have a free saddle inside. But it didn't, and so I crafted a primitive Argent saddle myself. With my Argent finally saddled, it was time to start laying the groundwork for real progress. I crafted one more stone foundation to go with the ones I'd snagged from various supply drops, and then began to work on a few drop traps. Now that I had Spooky, the whole airlift a creature to base strategy was in full swing, and I had 2 creatures in mind, that Anki and Doed I'd spotted earlier. While I flew around searching for the Anki, I laid waste to anything I could find that could supply me with some extra hide. Eventually, I found the Anki again and scooped it up with Spooky, flapping my way back to base like a puppy with a new toy. I dropped it into one of the traps, only to remember in a brilliant flash of hindsight that an Anki doesn't fit in a 1-wide box. So I tore down part of one trap, added it to the other, and dropped the Anki in again, and this time had no issues. I loaded it up with trank arrows, letting the poison do its work while I went berry picking with brain rot. Sure enough, by the time I returned, the Yankee was snoozing soundly. I fed it the measure berries I had just gathered, and that was one tame well underway. With it safe here at my base, I dismantled most of its trap, recycling the pieces to rebuild the Doid trap. Before heading out again, I detoured to grab a yellow drop, which had a nice upgrade for both my Argentavis saddle and my canteen situation. Then, before going after the Doid, I took another detour to the Ice Wyvern hilltop, and now hovering above the hill was a very nice potential parent. 185. Oh, and there's two oh, I have to come get these eggs. I have to. Back on task, I resumed the search for the Doid and quickly found it locked in a fight with a Carnotaurus. I swooped in, plucked it from the jaws of death, and carried it safely back home. Once here, I dropped it perfectly into the trap, and then it was arrow time. After putting enough tranks in it to guarantee nap time, I hopped back on brain rot, gathering more berries, and waited for the sleepy face to kick in. Once the Doid passed out, I fed it, then turned to another pressing matter, my drug empire, continuing to grow my stockpile of narcotics. I hung around base the next morning, babysitting the Doid, keeping it thoroughly doped up on narcoberries. Once I was confident it was going to stay in its nap long enough to seal the deal, I mounted up on Autumn and took to the skies. Today's goal, trap and tame a griffin. On my way to find one, I would stop for a moment to rest Autumn's wings in a very interesting spot.
The heck?
Back on the hunt, I paused for a red drop which was being casually guarded by a family of hyenas. They didn't seem to mind me waltzing in, so I did just that. The drop itself was a medicinal buffet. Then it was back to griffin searching mode. I started at the edge of the massive canyon. Sadly, there were no griffins, just a pteranodon running for its life, which didn't exactly inspire confidence. What seemed like hours passed in the sky until eventually I reached a lake lined with massive beaver dams. I wasn't going to ignore free loot, so I flew Autumn straight into one, cracking it open like a piñata and scooping up everything: cementing paste, rare mushrooms, rare flowers, and pearls. The beavers were not thrilled. Naturally, I had to check the lower lake for even more dams, and that's when I saw them. Griffins, finally. Only problem, these majestic beasts weren't exactly the world beaters I was looking for. So to make myself feel better, I robbed another beaver home and then pushed on with the search high into the mountains. I eventually spotted another griffin patrolling a peak, but again, it was not strong enough. By nightfall, I had found myself searching into the frozen peaks where, lo and behold, I spotted another griffin. He too, though, was disappointingly fragile, and his friend nearby somehow managed to be even worse. With my griffin dream still hanging by a thread, I flew back to the entrance to the canyon, hoping today would be different. And it was. Tucked away in the trees was a griffin finally worth taming. 130, baby. What's the other one? Level 10. That's what I'm talking about. I scouted out a nearby plateau where I would build the trap, and of course, I'm using one designed by my good buddy Captain FATDOG, the Trap Master. Make sure you check out the video linked in the description and his channel. Once the trap was set, I lured the high-level griffin across the gap, and after one dumb hiccup where it pretended to forget it was supposed to let me trap it, it sailed right into the trap. Then began the slow, careful work of loading with trank arrows while simultaneously restocking my supply. And of course, just as it started to get sleepy, my crossbow broke. Good thing I came prepared with a backup in my pocket like the rugged professional I pretend to be. One more arrow and down it went, face first into the dirt, majestic as ever. With it out, I scoured the wilds for prime meat, finally finding a pack of hyenas, one of which had a baby in tow. I swooped in, snatched it from the family reunion, and carried it to a nearby cliff for some bonding. Of course, the pup decided to plummet off the cliff immediately. I chased after it until eventually I took it out, securing my griffin's meal. I brought the offering to the griffin, and it began to slowly tame. With it going, I returned home, where I was welcomed not just by my new companions, but also 3 fresh moss chop eggs, which I quickly stashed away. I figured the Yankee deserved something special, so I gave him the Ascendant saddle I had looted earlier, officially knighting him with the classic name, Pincushion. And of course, I couldn't ride my new Doid just yet because, plot twist, I was short on hide again. So out I went with Spooky, who helped butcher some unfortunate parasaurs in record time. Hide gathered, saddled crafted, and with a ceremonious slap to the back, I named the Doid Snowball. The following morning, I returned to the griffin just in time to see it tame up from a distance. Without wasting a moment, I cryoed up Autumn, thanking her for all of her service, and hopped aboard my brand new ride. The skies were mine again, but the honeymoon didn't last long. I spotted another wild griffin nearby and decided it was time to put my new mount to the test. Turns out, I've forgotten how to properly dive bomb as I kept missing the timing. So I resorted to just normal attacks, and if I'm being honest, the damage was underwhelming. So I changed plans. I whipped out my crossbow and began firing. Eventually, I took the wild one down, but the fight left me wondering if this griffin would be in fact my long-term solution. But putting doubts aside for a moment, I named the beast Razorbeak. On Razorbeak, I pushed back into the snow biome, grabbing a yellow drop along the way that gifted me another saddle I'd need down the line. But the real draw here was something else entirely. I couldn't ignore the pull of the wyvern nest. I wanted an egg, even a mediocre one, just to say I did it. So I picked a fight, shot an arrow into one of the ice wyverns, hoping to lure it and the rest away. It kind of worked. One followed me briefly before turning back like it forgot what it was doing. I circled back to the nest again to sneak another peek, but naturally I got too close and all 3 wyverns came after me. Clearly I needed a new plan, so I returned home and grabbed Fluffer, hoping that having her ride shotgun in Razorbeak's claws would allow her to scoop up one of the eggs once we got close enough. I returned to the nest to find one of the wyverns was hovering high above out of range, and the other was seemingly waiting on a yellow drop to come down, so I made my move. But Fluffer just sorta stared at the egg. I tried again, but she was completely uninterested, so I risked it and landed in one of the nests myself. The egg was only a level 75, so I would hold off for now, but seeing how Fluffer had no interest in doing her job, I cryoed her up. Hoping for something better in the second nest, I tried to get a look which drew the attention of the hovering wyvern. I fled, but of course, as usual, I wasn't watching my stamina, and as I tried to escape, Razorbeak began to falter, falling slowly toward the ground. The wyvern was already on us, breathing cold death, and I had no choice. As we drifted down, I turned Razorbeak back towards the beast and fought midair, clawing and biting like both of our lives depended on it. Luckily, it wasn't a strong wyvern, and after a tense clash, Razorbeak came out victorious.
Oh, you got 20 levels from that. Okay, huh?
With it gone, I swooped into the second nest only to find the egg was even worse than the first, so I settled for the level 75 egg, then decided to grab the other one as well, if for no other reason than to spite the wyvern who had nearly killed Razorbeak. Once home, I dropped the wyvern egg into the bin, then grabbed some measure berries off brain rot and headed out on autumn with the goal of completing my next skill point task: tame 5 herbivores with over 90% effectiveness. Thankfully, it didn't take long to find a pair of dodos wandering about. One quick arrow put the first one to sleep, and I slipped it some berries. One arrow in the second one, and it was down as well, and I loaded it up with berries too. The first one tamed, I thanked it for its contribution to my task, then promptly killed it. Moments later, the second one would be met with the same fate. A little farther up the hill, I found 2 more dodos and ran the same process: trank, feed, and wait. The first of the pair tamed, and when it did, I claimed its baby, which counted towards the skill task. I kept the baby, as it would be useful for another task I have coming up, but the parent, well, you know the drill. The second one finished taming as well, which completed the task, and again, it had some babies patiently waiting, so I claimed them and sent the parrot to an early retirement. With the taming goal complete, I had another objective: collect 2 more babies. First target, a listro. I took out the parent with these and scooped up the baby. The last one took forever. I wandered through more bush than a bachelor in the 80s, until finally spotting another listro with a baby. You know the routine by now: parent goes down, baby comes home. But when I returned home, something was off. My Argentavis was just floating. There was no sign of what caused the chaos, no explanation. I decided to pretend nothing happened. Instead, I turned to my next project: raising the babies, as one of my future tasks was to get 100% imprinting on 5 babies. While they began growing, I focused in on the task that came before theirs: gathering 10,000 berries. It was Brain Rot's moment to shine, and it didn't disappoint, finishing the task in the blink of an eye. Just as I wrapped up berry gathering, I discovered what had disturbed my Argent before. A drakeling swooped in, setting fire to my Mozchop's egg line like someone had just activated the Burning Land spell card. For a moment, I thought about taming it, but I wasn't quite ready for the task, so I mounted up on Spooky, chased it down, and ended the threat. The ordeal told me it was time to finally move off this beach and find somewhere more permanent, but first I had some more preparations to do, starting with gathering some nearby metal, now using pincushion, which I loaded up into the forge to begin cooking. While it cooked, I started on the next grind, gathering 1,200 wood for what would become the literal foundation of my next home: a wooden cliff platform. When I finished, I realized I would need to craft more cryopods for transporting all of my tames, and to do that, I would need more hide. Anything that wandered into view was quickly turned into a pile of hide. By the time I returned from hide gathering, I had enough metal smelted to craft the wooden cliff platform. With that done, it was time for the Great Migration. I began loading every last bit of gear into Spooky's inventory, and then it was time to start cryoing the tames, starting of course with the babies. I quickly hit a wall though. I was still a few cryos short and didn't have enough crystal to make what I needed, so I hopped on Razorbeak and returned to the mountaintop to harvest more. I returned with enough to make 9 more cryopods, and just like that, every tame except Spooky was cryoed, and I was ready for the long journey. I floated in the air for a moment on Spooky's back, looking down on where I'd gotten my start in these lands one final time before setting off. The journey was long and mostly boring, but as the night was closing, I spotted some slick black rocks along the base of a volcano. I knew they would be rich with obsidian, a resource I would need for making scissors. The journey continued into the next morning, where as I began getting closer to my eventual forever home, I passed by a family of ovis grazing quietly on the tall grass. For a moment, I considered scooping up a few of the babies to raise, but ultimately I passed on developing a mutton farm. Then things got got a little more intense. Near the cliffs that overlook what will be my new base location sat an apex predator, a giga, patrolling the valley between the hills. I ignored it for now and pressed on to my base. Thankfully, the spot I had in mind should be safe from the giga. Nestled into the mouth of a cave was the place I would call home for the rest of my stay here. It was the sort of peaceful, secluded spot that I could plan all of my future conquests from. Just outside, I noticed a beach basilosaurus laying motionless in the sand, practically gift wrapped. I harvested it for a bounty of spoiled meat and oil, a useful welcome package. With that, it was time to move in. I started by placing my cliff platform, anchoring it to the wall of the cave's entrance. Not as a permanent solution, but just a temporary post to begin working from. With the platform secured, I unloaded everything, started getting my tames out of cryos, and checked in on the babies I had brought along. Unfortunately, it wasn't looking great. Most of them were raising faster than I could imprint on them, but I couldn't dwell on that. I had other priorities. Outside, I began assembling a new trap, something that would hopefully help me expand the roster again soon. I crossed over a narrow sliver of ocean to a nearby island, which was home to a large freshwater lake. Beaver dams sat throughout the lake like natural treasure chests. I landed atop one with the goal of looting it and drawing out all the beavers. Things just didn't go exactly how I'd hoped.
Oh, I can actually loot it from the top.
Nice. Oh gosh. Oh, we've made
A mistake. We made a terrible mistake. Come on, brother.
Once I was safely back on Spooky, I began sorting through the beavers with my spyglass until eventually I glanced a level 145. I scooped it up and flew it home, dropping it neatly into the new trap and quickly knocking it out. I gathered some berries and began the taming process. Then, as the night was ending, I noticed one of the dodos had finished raising without ever needing an imprint. My plan for getting my next skill points wasn't looking too good. There was no time to sulk though. I turned my attention to upgrading the armor I didn't get from drops to flak. Then, using some of the obsidian I gathered along the way, I crafted myself a pair of scissors, and it was time to get myself looking right. Inside my cooking pot, I mixed up some tinto berries to make myself some red dye, followed by some black dye from narcos and stimberries. Once mixed, I took a moment to dye my hair a deep, bold red, a look that screamed, I need attention. I then took a break from the coloring for just a moment as my beaver was nearly awake and needed another batch of narcotics to keep it asleep and taming. When I returned to my pad, I was faced with the disappointing realization the dodos and listros had raised without needing a single imprint. The task was a bust, and so I took out my anger on the innocent little creatures I had just raised. That was the start of my emo phase. I returned to my fashion overhaul, dyeing my armor black to match my current mood. Later in the day, I scooped up Snowball and headed to the top of the hill. It was time to crush rocks as I needed stone by the bunches for my next goal. Once I had enough, I headed back across the ocean to the Beaver Island, this time with the goal of gathering more hide. I started with a Phiomia, claiming its baby right after the kill to retry that failed imprint task. Nearby, I found 2 more Phiomia babies I could raise, and so I claimed them both, thinking surely they would work for the task. Then I spotted something better, a herd of bison, one of the newest creatures added to Ark, and the tame that I'll be using to fight the boss. They were all low levels though, so I figured why not thin the herd to make room for more. Turns out, that was a bad idea.
What the heck? Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, do not mess with the bisons. Holy crap, man. What the heck was that? What a freaking arsenal of abilities do those things have? It stunned me, it dismounted me.
Bruised but breathing, I returned to base and got the Phiomia babies out, beginning yet another attempt at the imprint task. With all the stone and hide I'd gathered, I crafted up a few more forges, trying to boost my metal production for future usage. As I finished placing those, it was time to once again pump the beaver full of narcotics one last time to keep it under till it tames. While out, I spotted a yellow drop that I couldn't resist, and inside was an Ascendant Megalocero saddle, which I'll make good use of before long. Returning to base with the saddle in hand, I shifted focus back to my metal operation, crafting a drop box from the visual storage mod. The drop box comes with a distribution system allowing me to dump it full of raw metal and evenly distribute that to all of my forges, making mass smelting a breeze. Now that the beaver needed no more babysitting, I set off towards the mountains on the nearby island, pincushion in tow, ready to test our metal hauling capabilities. The first peak was a bit disappointing. It had just a handful of rocks clinging to its ridge, but the second mountain, that was a different story. A dense cluster of metal-rich boulders sat atop the summit. This would be a key spot for us going forward. On the flight back, something caught my eye, a level 145 bison. I took a mental note of it for future taming. Once I returned, I dropped the metal at the base of the drop box. With one click, the visual storage system kicked in, distributing the load perfectly across all of the forges. And even better, my beaver was now awake and tamed. I scooped it up out of the trap and gave it a fitting name, Chucky. But there was little time for bonding. Superior kibble was now my main focus as I needed to tame the bisons, and I needed to start prepping for it. First step, setting up a line of preserving bins. I'd need them running constantly if I wanted enough jerky for the recipe. Of course, to keep them chilled, I'd need spark powder, so I started off grinding out what little bit I could to get them started. Last job for the day, I needed prime meat for the jerky, and the most reliable source for that is babies. I returned to the island across the water and began taking out anything I could find. The prime meat began sizzling over the campfire, and once it was cooked, I dropped it into the preserving bin alongside spark powder and oil, kickstarting the long process of turning it into jerky. While the bins did their thing, I turned my attention back to Chucky, crafting him a saddle and scooping him up to head off to the nearby redwoods. It was time to start stripping down the towering, girthy trees for their precious wood. But our peaceful harvesting didn't last long. A screech pierced the air as a flock of terrorbirds descended on us, forcing a quick skirmish and a desperate escape. Just as I thought things were settled and I could catch my breath, I noticed a rather interesting ichthyosaurus.
Dolphin? What the heck? Look at this dolphin. Oh my god, he's trying to swim underneath this. Oh no. Oh, there he is. Hello, friend. Oh, he's made it. It's a land dolphin. That is interesting.
Eventually, I found a slightly safer patch of redwoods, no weird sea creatures, no bloodthirsty birds, just trees and lots of them. Chucky and I went back to work, piling up wood until I had more than enough to light every forge back at camp. After that, I swapped out Chucky for Brainrot. I was now on a mission to gather seeds, specifically all 4 crop types, including citronal, a key ingredient in the superior kibble I'd need soon. As I headed home with pockets now full of seeds, I noticed a low-level Phiomia. I needed poop and couldn't wait for the babies to raise, so I scooped it up, carried it back to the trap, and knocked it out. It would tame up fairly quickly, and I named it Mudslide. With the pig now tamed and ready to work, I saddled up Brainrot to gather as many stimberries as I could. Back at base, I got to work crafting a shovel. Then crop plots. One by one, I laid them down along the edge of my cliff platform. A water tank came next, followed by an intake pipe running down into the water below. Then came the part that wasn't exactly glamorous, feeding stimberries to Mudslide to, well, create a mudslide. With a very fresh supply of fertilizer in hand, I used the shovel to till the soil and planted each of the 4 major crops, before topping off each plot with the results of Mudslide's efforts. With my little garden established, I turned to the next resource I needed, tree sap. I crafted a sap tap and headed off towards a smaller island just off of the redwoods, much safer than the thick woods themselves. Once there, I installed the tap high on a redwood tree, but I'd need a way to actually reach it, so I got to work crafting a scaffolding made of thatch leading right up to the tap. A bit of a climb, but now I'd be able to land on it and collect the sap with ease. With that sorted, I scouted the redwoods for the next addition to my team, a high-level Megaloceros. It didn't take long to find a level 110, and so I got out Spooky to scoop it up and head home. I dropped the deer off in the trap and then took a moment to check in on the baby Phiomias I was raising, which unfortunately looked like they would also raise up before I got a chance to fully imprint on them. There was good news though, my preserving bins had began turning out the first pieces of jerky. From there, I returned to the deer to quickly knock it out, and as it began taming, I headed back to the lesser metal mountain across the water, this time with the goal of gathering some of the crystal that covered its peaks. With a bit of crystal in my pockets, I returned home and immediately put it to use, crafting a single greenhouse wall. I placed it carefully in front of my crops, hoping the greenhouse effect would stretch to the edge of the cave, but it didn't. I added another wall, hoping for a miracle, but still nothing. Shifting gears, I got to work crafting a fabricator and placed it down. To power it up, I loaded some oil and hide into one of the nearby forges to craft my first batch of gasoline. Once the fuel was ready, the fabricator roared to life, and I immediately used it to craft an electrical generator, followed shortly by a refrigerator. Desperate for more upgrades, I dropped down to the shore to visit a few more beached Basilosaurus, harvesting the oil they left behind. Between that and what I'd already gathered, I had just enough to craft myself a grill. I threw the last of the oil into the forge along with some hide to keep the gasoline flowing, and then I tucked the generator neatly behind the fabricator and powered everything up. I then placed on the refrigerator and transferred over everything perishable. Right beside it, the grill went up, ready to handle any meat I could throw its way. Just as I finished setting things up and prepared to go retrieve the deer, something unexpected happened. A visitor entered the base uninvited.
Okay. Just landed on my head. What is this? Okay. All right. Trandon's just coming to visit. What's up, man? How are you doing, brother? I can't even tell what level it is because it is like bugging out. All right, well, that was just the strangest thing that's happened to me in a while.
Putting that weird encounter behind me, I scooped up the newly tamed deer and named him Bucky. When I returned to the base with Bucky, what I had feared would happen did. The 3 little pigs I was raising were now all grown up, and again, I wasn't able to 100% imprint on them, so I cryoed them up with a new idea in mind. I had spotted a Karchar patrolling the coastline near my base. I thought maybe if I offered him the pigs as a sacrifice, he would spare my base from any potential destruction. With the Karchar's hunger satisfied and my base secure for a little longer, I departed again in search of more tames. My next target, a Daedon. Its healing ability would be critical for raising my wyvern egg without needing milk. But before I could even begin, I spotted something else, a Veilwine, one of the newest creatures from the Lost Colony DLC. It was a stunning sight, but I wouldn't be taming this one. The cold air of this mountain range was dropping my health rapidly, and I couldn't risk swooping in to grab it. I continued my search along the snowy edges, scanning every slope and frozen hill for the signs of a Daedon. But luck wasn't on my side. The mountains remained silent. I flew toward another snow-covered peak, only to be stopped short by the sheer cold. I couldn't even approach without my health plummeting. Then finally a break. Off in the distance, I spotted a Daedon locked in a battle with an Argentavis. I swooped in, drawing the Argent away from my potential new friend. As I landed nearby to prepare, something curious caught my eye. Another Veilwind. These fox-like companions are unlike anything else. They don't require food, narcotics, or even a saddle. You simply claim them. With the fox now following behind me, I got on my Argentavis and scooped up the Daedon to take it home for a safer tame. But it wasn't exactly thrilled about this new arrangement, and as we flew, it gnawed away at me little by little. As we approached the volcano, my Argent was starting to look rather rough. So I dropped the Daedon for a moment and hunted down a nearby snake, dispatching a bit and harvesting the corpse to trigger the Argent's healing ability. But when I returned, the Daedon was gone. I searched around, but there was no sign of it. Not wanting the trip to be a complete waste, I scooped up a nearby dung beetle instead. It might not be what I came for, but it was something I needed anyways. On the way home, I looped back through the snow near the redwoods, hoping for one last chance, but fate had other plans. In the chaos of the cold, my poor little fox companion was killed, but I wasn't heartbroken as it's a companion pet and would return again in time. With still no luck finding another pig, I made a quick stop at the tree sap tap to collect its sweet, sticky nectar and then headed home. I started the next morning collecting some fresh poop from Bucky and fed it to the dung beetle, watching closely as it munched away, nearly taming. Just in time, the last of my baby Phiomia had finished raising and was more than happy to provide the next meal. Moments later, the beetle was mine. I named it Pooper Scooper. And while Pooper Scooper might have been a helpful addition to the base, it didn't mean my newly raised pig would be spared. It too became a peace offering, another sacrifice to keep the nearby Karchar from turning its eyes towards my cave. With peace secured a while longer, I finally did something I probably should have done ages ago. I crafted a bed and placed it on the edge of the platform. Then I laid down to catch some rest. No, not to resurrect my fox, I swear. It was just 3 AM at this point, and I needed to be up for work in about 4 hours. But when I did log back on the following night, my fox had been reborn. I named her Glaceon. This tame is no ordinary fox. She comes loaded with a variety of abilities I won't dive too deep into just yet, but let's just say she's something special. My favorite ability? Call Friends. It duplicates the fox up to 6 times, and it's every bit as cool as it sounds. After checking that out for a moment, it was back to work. I still needed a Daedon, and this time I was going to get it. First stop, grabbing an Ovis from the same place I had seen them earlier. With some mobile mutton in hand, I headed back towards the snow-covered peaks. There, running through the trees, I spotted it, another Daedon. Quickly, I placed down the stone structures I had brought along and assembled a drop trap. Then I swapped to my Argentavis, ready to scoop up the prize. But first, I had to find it again. I scanned through the trees, but found nothing. The Daedon had simply vanished. So with no choice, I picked up my trap and continued the search, determined not to go home empty-handed. As I soared through the snow, I spotted another Daedon locked in a battle with a Chalico. I took a quick bite out of the Ovis I brought along, loading up my Argentavis with fresh mutton, and made my move. I scooped up the Daedon mid-fight and carried it down the mountainside to a large boulder, perfect for a makeshift taming trap. As Glaceon danced through the snow to keep the Daedon distracted, I built the trap quickly, then dropped it inside. Without hesitation, I began loading it full of trank arrows until it slumped to the ground. While waiting for the tame to finish, a Diplo and Dire Bear decided it was the perfect time to crash the party. I whistled for Glaceon to attack, then began playing around with her Call Friends ability, eager to test out a full army of fox. But before I could get the whole team out, the bear struck her down. It wasn't long after that a stray Argent swooped in, one last pest to deal with. I fought it off, and just as the snow settled, the Daedon finally stood up, tamed and mine. Once back at base, I gave the newest addition a fitting name, Pumbaa. With all of that excitement behind me, I picked the first batch of citronal from my crop plot and made my way to the cooking pot. It was time to check what else I needed for superior kibble. Turned out, I had it all. By nightfall, I had my very first piece of superior kibble cooking away. While waiting, I got another batch of spark powder going, something I'd need later on for crafting gunpowder. But the moment the kibble was ready, everything else could wait. I set off immediately for Bison Island, determined to track down the level 145 I'd seen days ago. That was until I saw a pair of 140 males and my mind played tricks on me. convincing me that it was one of them I had spotted previously. So with the 145 completely forgotten, I started shooting one of the 140s from the back of my Griffin, but it didn't take long to realize this plan wasn't going to work. I rushed back to base and grabbed some trap pieces, crafting a few ramps on the way out. Once back at the field, I started setting up the taming trap, but luring one of the bison in was less than graceful. It wasn't having it. Eventually, I gave up on getting it up the ramp and instead just yanked down a few of the walls. The bison walked straight in through the opening, and I dropped down walls behind it. Just as I started knocking it out, the other 140 showed up to ruin my day. I backed off, trying to lure the second one far away, but every time I got it out of sight, it would turn right back around and run to check on its buddy. Eventually, I managed to drag it far enough that it stayed put. I raced back to the trap and finished knocking the first bison out just as its friend was showing back up. To keep it safe, I surrounded it with spiked walls and got to work resetting the trap for the second one. I figured I'd knock both out and see which one had better stats. When I finally got the second male into the trap, chaos broke loose. In my rush to wall it in, I accidentally threw Kitty's soft paws off my shoulder. The bison bucked, knocking me clear off a razor beak. Scrambling, I managed to leap back into the saddle and scoop Kitty up just in time. With the high level one secured, I lured the rest of the bison herd off a cliff at the back of the island. Then I returned and knocked out the second high level bison. Neither of them had standout stats pre-tame, but one had slightly better base melee, so I went with that one. As it tamed up, I spent the remaining time doing what I always seem to need to do, gathering more hide. The early morning was spent finishing what I'd started, waiting for that bison to finally tame. When it did, I cryoed it up. It wasn't bad. It had 39 points in melee and an impressive 54 in stamina. Back at base, I switched gears. My Yankee and I went out gathering flint for another round of spark powder production. To speed things up, I crafted extra mortar and pestles and set them all to work. With that underway, I turned my attention to a different mission. I grabbed some chowder I'd gotten from drops, cryoed Chucky, my only tame capable of underwater adventures, and headed out towards the red obelisk. Before diving in, I stopped to snag a purple ring drop. Inside was, let's say, a cruel tease. Another batch of jerky, just not the type I needed. From there, I flew over to a small ledge overlooking the waters. Out came Chucky, and we plunged into the blue, where we were immediately met by an overly curious manta. Chucky made short work of it. As the last bubbles from the fight drifted upward, I spotted exactly what I'd come here for: oil rocks. I surfaced to drink the chowder, but before I even could, another overly eager manta swam over to attack. It came completely out of the water, killing itself in the process. With that dealt with, I downed the chowder and dove back in to start farming oil. Of course, Chucky wasn't entirely on board with my plan, surfacing every time I dismounted. Thankfully, I remembered the simple fix: to have him follow me. And with that, we were back to business, chipping away at the precious oil deposits for the rest of the night. I continued chipping away at oil rocks into the next morning until an unwelcome shadow slid into view: a megalodon. I tried holding my ground with my pike, but it was like trying to poke holes in a battleship. I bailed before things got bloody. On the way home, I stopped by the tree tap again to collect another bundle of sap. Once home, I collected a seed from each of my crop plots and got to work on expanding the farm, crafting a few more greenhouse pieces and 4 brand new crop plots. I set them on a foundation out in the open, boxing them in with greenhouse walls to give them that warm, cozy growing effect. With the frames in place, I tilled the soil and dropped a water well nearby, as apparently my existing one didn't reach this far, and then I finished planting the new crops. I followed that with a little extra plumbing work, placing a water tap next to my cooking pot for quicker refills, and a water intake below the platform because, again, my original setup just didn't quite make the stretch. Next, I scraped together all the charcoal I could find, fed it into the mortar and pestle, and started grinding out gunpowder. That soon became simple rifle ammo, and in between rounds, I crafted a magnifying glass, a tool that'll help me check the torpor of whatever I'm knocking out next. Once the bullets were done, I turned them into tranquilizer darts, letting the smithy hum away while I took advantage of a fresh batch of jerky to make more kibble. Speaking of jerky, I restocked the preserving bins with cooked prime meat and oil to keep the jerky, well, jerking. The next day, I was back on the hunt for bison. In the clearing just above my base, a 130 female was grazing, completely unaware that I had plans for her. But before I could even make a move, the fog shifted, and through it came the hulking silhouette of the Giga. It stormed into the herd like a living landslide, tearing through the bison without a moment's pause. I retreated to the island where I'd found the males before, and that's when I spotted it. The 145 I'd somehow forgotten about entirely. The 140 male I'd passed on earlier was also still here, pinned inside the spikes I'd left around it. I already knew his stats weren't impressive, so my sights were set on the 145 instead. It bolted straight into my trap, but so did its companion. That left me with no choice but to trap them both together. I loaded my rifle and started pumping rounds into the weaker bison, but it refused to go down. I tried letting it go, but in the chaos, the 145 slipped out instead. Eventually, the weaker one got out too, so I called on Glaceon and its fox friends. They tore the poor creature apart in seconds, leaving me almost startled at their sheer efficiency. With it out of the way, I pulled the 145 back into the trap and locked the walls behind it. Before long, it was down, though its stats weren't exactly jaw-dropping. So I turned my attention back to the caged 140. It had apparently been seething in my absence because the second it saw me, it it started shredding my spiked walls. Thankfully, it ran straight into my trap, but before I could close it, it burst out, flinging me from my griffin and tossing my mount aside. I scrambled back, remounted, and drew it in again, this time sealing the trap for good. It dropped after a short fight, and since it had already starved earlier, it tamed instantly. The stats came out to 40 points in health, which was decent, but not what I was really after. The rest of the night was spent searching for more bison, turning my fox pack loose on anything that didn't meet my standards. The search bled into the next morning into the fields above my base, where I spotted another small herd of bison, but just like before, they were too weak. The fox didn't hesitate. They swept in and ended them before I could even sigh in disappointment. I returned to Bison Island, though at this point my hunt had turned more into a stress test to see how much destruction my foxes could cause. The answer was quite a lot. The search then carried me to the far side of the Redwoods Island, the one where I'd set up my tree sap tap. There, more bison grazed in the open, but again, nothing worth keeping. So I gave the signal, and my foxes went to work. That is, until another herd stormed in from the flank. I panicked, trying to make sure my foxes didn't shred a hidden high-level prize, but in the chaos, my whole pack got wiped out. Just like that, the hunt had gone from ruthless efficiency to complete disaster. And to rub salt in the wound, none of the newcomers were worth taming either. With no more leads and nothing to show for my day, I headed home. The only silver lining waiting for me was the sound of more jerky finishing its long dry. By the time I put it all away, I had enough to start cranking out a good supply of kibble. I was short on rare mushrooms though, so I set off towards the swamp, but not before taking a little detour. I couldn't resist swinging by the ice wyvern nesting grounds, just in case a better egg had spawned. Diving in on Razorbeak, I went after the wyverns guarding the nest, hoping to lure them away. It worked for a while until they turned back towards their precious egg, so I dove in again, this time choosing to stand my ground and fight. One of them eventually lost interest, peeling away into the sky. I took my chance and struck down the other before its friend could return. When the second wyvern came back, I was ready, and before long, it too crashed to the snow in defeat. Landing in the nest, I eagerly checked my prize, only to find yet another disappointing egg. With that, I left the frozen peaks behind and continued on to the swamp. At one point, I even switched to my pike just for a little extra reach without dismounting. While in the area, I visited a nearby island of rolling grass hills, only to discover it was home to yet another herd of bison. None were worth taming, but it was good to note another spawning ground. Then, as I was about to leave the swamp, I remembered something important. The little sanctuary of rare flowers was surrounded by the very trees I needed. I set to work gathering every rare mushroom I could carry. The gathering continued into the next morning until I finally had enough mushrooms to call it a success. I headed home, only to be distracted yet again. On the way back, I spotted fresh ice wyverns circling the peaks and brand new eggs in the nest. Resistance was futile. I flew up towards the beast, pulling them away from their prize. With some careful maneuvering, I managed to separate them, coaxing one into a battle without its companion. After a tense minute of circling, I struck it down, which left only one, and I opened the fight with a few shots from my rifle to soften it up. But this wyvern was far stronger. Its attacks tore into Razorbeak, and my mount began to falter. Forced into a desperate retreat, I dove into the canyon below, but the beast stayed on my tail. It was relentless, biting and clawing with every chance it got. Just as Razorbeak's strength was about to fail, I made one last dive and escaped at breakneck speed, finally shaking the monster for good. When I returned to the peak, my curiosity got the better of me, but two new wyverns had already taken up guard over the nest. I had no choice but to give up. I returned home with my haul of mushrooms, and at the same time, Glaceon had returned from its latest break. Even better, the preserving bins had dried out another batch of jerky. I put it straight to use, whipping up more superior kibble. To make the process smoother, I crafted a few extra water skins so I wouldn't need to refill so often, then settled into the grind. Batch after batch of kibble, deep into the night. By the time I was done, I had just enough energy left to start crafting a fresh supply of tranquilizer darts. Before heading back into the taming grind, I swung by a yellow ring drop, only to find something inside that instantly made all of those freshly crafted trank darts completely pointless. Oh, baby, baby. You love to see it. Oh, do you love to see that? All right, well, let's go back to base really quick, because that is definitely going to be more effective than our rifle that we have. And it's, oh, that makes everything so much easier, because I don't have to make flippin' trank bullets anymore. A short flight later, I snagged a blue drop that sweetened the blow. A second crossbow, strong enough to replace my long neck. With that upgrade, I headed towards the Redwoods Island, letting trank arrows quietly craft in my inventory during the trip. But the bison gods weren't smiling on me. Nothing worth taming wandered in these lands, so the unworthy fell victim to my trusty Snow Fox blender. That is, until I got cocky. One overconfident move later, and my foxes were defeated again. I retreated to the main bison island, where for a moment the hunt paused. The sunset spilling over the rolling hills was too perfect majestic not to admire. But beauty can be deceiving. The island was silent, barren of bison, and my search ended in disappointment. With both islands near my base turning up empty, I set out on a long journey across the map to the island behind the swamp. By the time I arrived, a thick pink fog had rolled in, shrouding the land and making it nearly impossible to spot anything. Eventually, the haze lifted, revealing a 145 adolescent bison, proof that somewhere nearby there had to be a 145 adult. Before I could focus on it, a pesky Serrato wandered too close, clearly intent on ruining the tame before it even began, and so I dealt with it first. With that nuisance handled, I started setting up another trap, but before I could finish, the bison itself decided to stroll in and interrupt the process. I eventually got the trap set, but at this point, the bison hive mind had made them well aware of my intentions. More likely, it was the boulders that were in the way of the trap, so I relocated the trap, and just like that, the bison ran right in. But I couldn't get the back walls up in time, and it broke free. In the chaos, all 3 bison wound up in the trap, which obviously wasn't the plan, but I wasn't about to waste the opportunity, so I locked them in anyway. Slowly and carefully, I began taking down the 2 I didn't want, while making sure not to harm my target. After some time, the first one went down. With only 2 females left, I could safely knock out the 145 without worrying about a mate boost, which then just left me to free the other one. I pulled up a wall and tried to bait it out, but it stubbornly stayed put, until it suddenly floated free, as if it had simply grown tired of the situation. Razorbeak quickly finished it off, and I removed the other corpse from the trap to avoid attracting unwanted guests. With the area finally secure, I surrounded my prize with spiked walls and began feeding it the kibble. I hung around until the bison finally finished taming, and this one came out with a health stat worth keeping for our future boss army.
46 health! Hello, mama! That is what I'm talking about. That is a boss level health right there. 46 health on the lady.
Then on my way home, I decided to swing past the desert. Along the way, I spotted a yellow ring drop with wyverns flying dangerously close. I grabbed it anyway, and then made for a nearby purple drop, only for it to vanish right before my eyes.
No! Why do the purple drops always do this to me? Oh my gosh. Every time I go for a flippin' purple drop, every video, I swear to God, every video there's one purple drop that does that to me.
At least the yellow drop made up for it though, giving me a Thyla blueprint, a pike blueprint, and some scuba gear that'll come in handy next time I venture beneath the waves. Then it was on to what I came through the desert for. I started harvesting sap from the Joshua trees, but without a chainsaw, it was going slow. Eventually, I just headed home, but the sweltering heat was cooking me alive, probably thanks to the full flak and riot armor I was wearing, so I stripped down to my undies just to cool off. Once I made it out of the desert, I stopped by the Redwoods Island, where my frost fox had returned and was eager for revenge against the bison here. This time, the fox army walked away victorious. As I continued clearing out the area, I spotted another high-level female bison, but first, I had to send in the fox to eliminate yet another pesky Serrato. With that handled, I laid down the trap, and to make things easier, I fired a shot on foot, drawing the bison straight in. But I only managed to get one wall up before she slipped out, but then thankfully, she just kind of slipped right back in, and this time, I shut the trap completely. Before long, I had loaded her with enough arrows to bring her down, and watched through my glass as she finally collapsed. I surrounded her with spiked walls, but with this area being more dangerous than usual, I chose to wait on giving her the kibble until she had starved down, turning instead to harvesting meat to heal Razorbeak. Once the bison had starved down, I fed it the kibble, and before long, the newest addition to the herd was all tamed up. Unfortunately, its stats were nothing to celebrate. I brought home the high health female and paired it with the male that had 39 points in melee. It wasn't as good as I'd like, but it was a start for now. Then after putting away my new gear and loot, I figured this was as good a time as any to start raising the wyvern, so I began crafting standing torches. I set them up in a neat little ring, dropped the egg in the center, and lit my ring of fire. Problem was, even with them all blazing, the egg refused to incubate, so I added a few more torches until finally, the little baby wyvern began to wiggle inside the shell. While it incubated, the first baby bison were born. Sadly, the one from the good parents came out female, so no new male breeder yet. The low level one was also female, so at least they'll both be useful for future breeding. The better female didn't inherit her dad's melee stat, so no instant perfect combo either. Still, I got them both out and started raising them. Then I milked both mother bisons, whose milk works just like wyvern's milk, meaning I didn't even need the Daedon I had tamed earlier. And with 2 baby herbivores to raise, I would need more berries, so it was back out on brain rot to get gathering. I came back to base with a haul of fresh berries and a batch of narcos, which I would use to get a fresh batch of narcotics brewing right away. Just as I got those going, my ice wyvern egg was finally ready to hatch. As the shell cracked open, I popped some of the mother bison's milk into its inventory, making sure the little one would have a proper meal when it got hungry. With babies now raising, my mind turned towards a bigger goal, building a proper base. The first step would be to get some visual storage bins set up, ready to hold the key materials for construction. But then I immediately got distracted with a lingering objective I wanted to finally cross off my list: 100% imprinting on 5 babies. My theory was the reason it didn't work before was because the babies had already been partially grown when I claimed them, so this time I went out hunting for adults that could give me fresh babies. I started by tracking down a group of 3 female dodos huddled together, a few quick shots, and they were out cold. Then I found a 4th who was only a level 5, and unfortunately a single arrow was enough to end its story before it began. The other 3 woke up to a feast of carrots, a special treat to make them mine. Not far from them, I came across another female, and just beyond her, a male to round out the group. They both tamed up nicely, leaving me just 1 female short. The beach turned up empty, but over on Bison Island, I found my final candidate. Before long, she too was tamed, bringing my little dodo breeding project full circle. After another quick berry harvest with brain rot, the morning air soon filled with a sound that can only be described as unsettling. My dodo birds making sweet, passionate love. It didn't take long before my oviraptor had scavenged every single freshly laid egg, proudly dropping them into my inventory like some kind of prehistoric Easter bunny. Naturally, I wasted no time tossing them out in front of a few torches to start hatching. The process was quick, and thanks to a few unexpected sets of twins, I suddenly had far more dodos than I had bargained for. I set them up next to the bison, giving each a stack of berries to start raising them. With that handled, I turned my attention back to the future, specifically my new base. I crafted another cliff platform, but before I could place it where I wanted, I had to clear out a thick patch of stubborn shrubbery. Once the area was clear, I set the platform down on one of the rocks towards the back of the cave, the perfect foundation for my upcoming build. And since that's where I'd be building from now on, it made sense to move the dedicated storage bins I just placed earlier. So I picked them up and relocated the entire setup to the new platform, ready for the next phase of construction. With the storage bins finally moved, I checked in on the dodos I'd been raising, and once again, it wasn't looking good. They were growing too fast, and this was going to be close. But it was no time to get distracted. I shifted my focus to gathering materials. Snowball was up first, happily crushing rocks to haul in a mountain of stone. Next, I crossed the water to the nearby island, pulling out my Ascendant sickle from a previous drop to harvest fiber. And by the time I made it back to base, my low-level female bison was ready to give birth again. But even more importantly, my other baby bison was ready for its final imprint, giving me 1 of 5 on the task for 100% imprinting. Moments later, the second baby bison followed suit, giving me 2 of 5 for my imprinting goal. And that was a relief because the dodos, well, they were hopeless. They'd grown up without a single imprint. I've got my settings tuned up for my shorter day lengths, but for tiny tames like dodos, that basically means imprinting is impossible. Thankfully, my second bison had also given birth, but the excitement was short-lived. It was a male without the stat combo I needed. Sadly, that meant one thing: I had to put the poor little guy out of his misery. The next morning, it was straight back to the grind, this time heading to the Redwoods Island with Bucky to haul in a barn's fill of thatch. I spent the entire first half of the day stripping the island bare, before finally loading up and heading back to base. While I'd been away, my first 2 baby bison had fully grown, and it was time to put them to work. I crafted up a saddle to make moving them around easier, then paired them up with the male, solely to produce more females for eventual mass breeding. And while I was here, I decided to move my wyvern over to the other platform. It was getting pretty big, and the main platform was starting to feel less like a base and more like a prehistoric traffic jam. The next morning, I brought a few more baby bison into the world. One was a promising female for breeding, while the other was a male who'd inherited the mother's solid 46 points in health, but missed out on his father's melee. Still, I decided to raise them both, as every baby counts towards that stubborn imprinting task I've been chasing for what feels like forever. With them growing, I set off once again for the Redwoods Island. This time, the mission was clear: haul back as much wood as Chucky could manage. And thanks to the recent quality of life change, Chucky could now keep auto-harvesting even after hitting weight capacity, an absolute game changer when paired with my Argentavis' massive carrying weight. Before long, I was flying home with a giant pile of logs, arriving just in time for my wyvern's imprint. That's when I learned the true magic of bison milk.
Well, there you go, bud. Wait, that just matured it a bunch. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't even know. Is that always been a thing with wyverns? I guess that goes to show you how many wyverns I have raised by using a Daedon to just keep them alive and never giving them milk.
But one trip wasn't enough. I returned to the Redwoods for a second haul, working late into the night before finally unloading the last of the materials I'd need to begin crafting my new building pieces. The following morning, I got to work on the first round of building pieces, knocking back some focal chili to give my crafting speed that little extra kick. So with hundreds of building pieces needing crafted, I needed something else to pass the time. What better way to do that than to play another awesome game called Stallcraft. Stallcraft is a hardcore PvP VE extraction shooter set in a large open world that is jam-packed with all sorts of events, from quests to random events or even real stalker players. Whether you choose to avoid encounters or engage in combat with other players, there is plenty of stuff to keep you playing for hundreds of hours. Stallcraft also features an in-depth weapon customization system, allowing you to upgrade everything from your weapon's sights, handguards, grips, and more. Whether you're someone like me who likes likes to sneak around and pick off enemies whenever I can as a silent scout, or someone who likes to go in guns blazing as a full-on armored up assault trooper, the way you play can be determined by the way you build your gear. All of this high-risk action will have you sweating, as whatever you carry out of a raid is yours to keep, but if you die, you lose the loot you found. Some other awesome features in StarCraft are the session modes like Deathmatch and Gun Game, allowing you to warm up with a quick 5 to 10 minute match of straight PvP. The tactical endgame content like Wild Zones that are extra dangerous but hold even better rewards. Clan Wars, which are tournament-style battles for strategic points that demand tight teamwork, as well as Operations, 3-player co-op raids with bosses and unique weapon mods, which will be coming to the game soon. There really are just so many great features in this game that you have to check it out for yourself. Jump into the zone today and enter my code to grab exclusive rewards from my channel. I'll see you in the zone. I would have to take a break from the fun of StarCraft though, as one of my baby bison was ready for its first imprint. With that done, I dove right back into the grind, crafting piece after piece until my wyvern demanded another imprint, another drink of bison milk, and he was nearly all grown up. From there, it was back again to the slow, steady rhythm of crafting, shaping the bones of what would eventually become my new home. The next day rolled in with a milestone. Another bison wanted an imprint, and thanks to the wyvern's progress, this was my 5th and final max imprint. At last, the long-running task was complete. I immediately put those points into the first tier of the imprinter skill, giving me up to a 10% boost to future imprints. While I was at it, I checked my upcoming tasks and saw that the first one was already well underway, crafting wooden building pieces. Before long, the last few pieces were done as I stood watching a fresh serving of meat cook over the grill. At the same time, my ice wyvern's raising also came to an end. Naturally, I had to take my newest beast out for a spin. During the flight, I decided to poke my head into the nearby wyvern trench to see if I could snag a few different eggs for variety back at base. But the place was swarming with wyverns, and a fire wyvern quickly singled me out. I tried to stand my ground, but it became obvious I was outmatched. A nearby Bronto ended up taking the heat, literally, and I slipped away. I looked back to find my opponent was a 165. On the way home to start building, I spotted something far more manageable, a small herd of bison with a 135 female among them. I dove in, scooping up another bison just to test a theory if my wyvern could carry them, and sure enough, it could. This was gonna make taming that 135 much easier. I rushed back to grab the drop trap materials and some kibble, but when I returned, the 135 had vanished. Instead, I found only a 120 male who was not worth the trouble. A bit more searching turned up another bison, wedged awkwardly into the side of a cliff. This one was a 130 female, worth considering alongside the 135 if I could find her again. Then while I was resting for stamina, one of the bison attacked my fox, sending it tumbling into the aggro range of another bison. After a few failed scoops, I finally grabbed one, and it was the 135 I was missing. So I hauled her back to a spot near my base and hastily threw together the drop trap. I dropped her prematurely, but still managed to box her in, and before long, she was fast asleep. With her secured, I built a second trap for the 130 female, scooped her off the hilltop, and knocked her out in short order. The day ended with me feeding kibble to the first bison, locking in what I hoped would be a solid addition to the herd. The next morning kicked off with me feeding the 130 bison. Before long, the first one, the 135 from yesterday, had finished taming, and she turned out to be exactly what I was hoping for, a high melee bison.
Alright, here we go. We want melee. Hey, health would be great, but we already got a 46 health, which is pretty good. Health is 34. Melee is 45, baby! Yes!
She'd be pairing up with my freshly raised male, who now had the high health stat. Before long, the 130 finished taming too, and while she didn't bring any standout stats to the table, she'd still make a fine addition to the breeding pool. So with both tames squared away, it was time to finally start working on my base. I began with one of the new features from the Lost Colony DLC, the Build Template Hammer. This handy tool lets you save templates of builds and then quickly recreate them later. For the sake of the video, I'll still do a proper build montage, but for now, the starting point was a circle of stone pillars from one of the saved templates. Before I could really get rolling, my new melee bison decided it was time to give birth. Unfortunately, the calf was a female without her mother's high melee. With that disappointment behind me, it was time to finally begin my first real build of this playthrough. Of course, that meant immediately messing up ceiling placements and having to pick them back up. And before I could get started again, more of my bison started giving birth. At this point, I was only after more females for future breeding, since none of these pairings could provide the perfect stat combo I was chasing. The next morning, it was time to finally, actually, get started on my first real build of the playthrough. So that is my main build for this playthrough, and for this build I wanted to go with something that fit the Viking theme, but wasn't necessarily your generic longhouse or normal Viking house. We've got the main circular section, which will just sort of be used for whatever we need it for. This side over here is where we're going to hide all of our visual storage bins. This other side is where we're going to keep some of our harvesting tames, and then this front area will hold all of my crafting stations. Overall, I really like the look of the build and think it's a unique take on a Viking build. And good news, there will be a link in the video description for where you can go download the build template for this build so you can quickly get it in your world using the build template hammer. With the main structure complete, I turned my attention to expanding the platform beneath it, pushing it out as far as my current supply of ceilings would allow. But progress hit a wall when I reached spots that didn't have proper support. The only solution was to start crafting a fresh batch of pillars and wade into the water below, placing them down to the ground to hold up the growing foundation. I carried on with the platform work into the next morning, but before long I hit another wall as I was again out of ceilings. A quick crafting session got me moving again, but soon I burned through my stone supply and had to pause. Before restocking, I wanted to move my breeding bison over, and to do that I needed to free up some cryopods. That meant the useless baby bison I'd been stockpiling for far too long were no longer needed. With space freed, I began the Great Migration, moving all my bison over and surrounding the male with his entourage of lucky ladies to keep the breeding line going. Once the herd was settled, I took Snowball up into the hills to gather the stone I need to finally finish the base floor. I hauled it back and dumped it into the storage before remembering a few more lady bison I'd completely forgotten about and moved them over to join the party. The next day I resumed the platform work, crafting ceiling after ceiling to fill in the last gaps of my base floor. Piece by piece, the empty spaces disappeared until I finally placed the last one, completing this side at last. And the timing couldn't have been better. Another round of baby bison had just been born. Sadly, yet again, none carried the stat combo I was chasing, and the unlucky males were promptly called from the herd. The females, however, earned a place in the raising pens. With that sorted, I turned my focus back to the build, cranking out more ceilings and starting the extension of the platform's other side. By the time the next morning began, the second side of my platform was finally complete. With the floor finished, I moved on to something new, crafting a primitive vase. This wasn't just decorative pottery, it was the main workstation for one of my mods, Primitive Stations. It swaps out the usual metal and machinery crafting benches for something that actually looks like it belongs in a Viking house. The smithy, of course, stayed as is. It was already rugged enough to fit in, so I placed a fresh one in my new base. But before getting started on placing those, I turned my attention to storage. One by one, I crafted and placed every type of visual storage bin I'd need, lining them neatly inside their designated space. Outside, I set up a drop box to handle incoming materials. Then came the satisfying part if you're the type of person who enjoys meticulous tasks. I began organizing everything, assigning each resource to its proper bin, and with the Dropbox distribution system, all my materials from the old pad quickly found their new home in my fresh storage hall. The next morning brought on the halfway mark of this 100-day journey, and the pieces were starting to click into place. My shiny new base wasn't just a construction project anymore, it was becoming a home. The next step was to move over the army of tames I've collected over the first 50 days, and Sergeant Spitz was among the lucky few to gain a spot inside out of the cold. I also brought the baby bison in, keeping them separated from the rest of the herd. Then, well, came the dodos. I had plans for a charming little Viking chicken coop, but the constant squawking had driven me to my limit.
Somebody stop those barking dogs!
Somewhere in the shuffle, I realized my ice wyvern still didn't have a name. I christened it Glacier. Then back on track, I dove into my next project, crafting all of my primitive stations, 2 primitive generators, a primitive fabricator, a grill, even a rug and bed to make the upstairs feel more like a true living space, and a primitive refrigerator joined the list too. The bed and rug went on the upper level, turning it into a cozy place to rest. The generators found a home atop some tall columns, doubling as a bit of decorative flair. Then came the heavy lifting, moving my forges into the new workshop and hauling every piece of loot I owned up to the top floor and sorting it into new storage bins. By nightfall, my primitive fridge and grill were in place too, packed full of perishables and ready for the days ahead. Somewhere between perfectionism and madness, I found myself knee-deep in another entirely unnecessary task, adding railings to my platform. Of course, halfway through, I ran out of wood, so I took Chucky up to the hill above my cave to harvest the few trees that were growing up here. With the extra wood in hand, I returned to the platform and doubled down. Literally, a second line of railings now placed beneath the platform purely for the look of it. Just as I was admiring my work, my boss bison pair gave birth to another calf, and it was a total dud, failing to get both the good melee and health stat. But I didn't have time to mope. Several babies were still raising and the trough needed berries, so I jumped on Brain Rot for another harvest run, only to accidentally clip a Bronto during the gathering spree. Oh no, I just hit a Bronto. Oh no, we hit a Bronto! We hit a Bronto! Run! It's the freaking Bronto with the Parasaur!
Come on, Bray, run! Get out of here, brother!
Back at base, I had a revelation. There was no reason for me to manually fill my trough with berries when the drop box works on food items as well. I quickly set it up and transfer the berries in a flash. Then I noticed something odd. Some of my female bisons, despite having fewer stat points in melee, had higher actual melee values. It didn't make sense, but rather than trying to figure it out, I just decided to continue breeding these females as well. Early into the following morning, the next batch of bison babies were born, and once again, neither of them had the stat combo I was looking for. Then it hit me. The reason their mothers had shown higher melee than expected was imprinting. That stat boost had completely thrown me off. The mystery was solved, frustration only slightly reduced. To take my mind off it, I churned back to productivity, crafting a solid stash of gunpowder and spark powder. I then began turning the gunpowder into simple bullets, which I would use to then start crafting shotgun shells. And with those crafting away in the background, I noticed a few of the newly raised bison had matured. I placed them outside the main structure, not quite ready to join the breeding ranks just yet. One of them, though, would be tagging along with me in a cryopod to provide some extra backup for what comes next. I grabbed some med brews and antidotes from storage, dusted off the Ascendant shotgun I'd stashed away back at the start of this journey, and stuffed my pockets full of shotgun shells. Razorbeak and I took to the skies, headed for the first cave of the playthrough. Not necessarily for the artifact, this was a gear run. I wanted those cave drops, hoping that maybe I'd get lucky and find a bison saddle blueprint. Just outside the cave, I swooped in on a purple ring drop and found a nice surprise: chitin leggings that actually beat out my flak. With spirits high and shotgun in hand, I turned to the cave's entrance. It was time to go in. This first cave is known as the Jungle Dungeon. It holds the artifact of the hunter and is located roughly right here on your map. The first stretch of the cave was strangely quiet. Only a few spiders dared to slow me down, but they were no match for my shotgun. But not long into the next morning, I spotted my first drop. Of course, it was just barely out of reach, but with a bit of awkward maneuvering, I hopped off my bison's back and snagged it.
Ah ha ha! We got up here. Yes, some nice cloth gloves, baby!
Then came the real challenge. I entered a massive chamber with rivers of lava flowing far beneath. To cross, I'd need some skilled platforming. And unfortunately, Glaceon had zero chill under pressure.
I think that's what's happened. Everything has... Oh, alright, bye, Glaceon.
See you, chump.
Oh, but before I could even mourn Glaceon's latest death, I had to defend myself from a bat that came to attack. I eventually took it down and continued parkouring my way over the jumps until eventually I reached another large room, and inside of it were drops. The first one was red and didn't have anything remarkable inside of it. The yellow drop, though, had something very nice.
Grab this yellow drop. What you got for me, girl? Okay.
I pressed forward, pushing through one final tunnel swarming with enemies before reaching the artifact room. A few risky jumps later, and there it was. The artifact was within my reach. Now, all I had to do was get back out of the cave.
Oh, baby, we made it. Holy crap, that one was kind of close. Oh, gosh. Oh, no. No, no, no. No. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Oh, we could have died there. They could have pushed me off and killed me. Where did they come from? The walls. They came from the walls. See if it was worth it.
Holy Jesus.
I mean, it's not bad stuff, obviously, you know. It doesn't hurt to have that kind of that loot, but
once I touched down safely back at base, I was greeted by excellent timing. My two top-tier bison had just finished mating. While waiting for the baby, I crafted an artifact pedestal and climbed to the top of my new base. There, I proudly displayed my prize for the world to see. The morning began with anticipation. I waited for my next baby bison from my prize stat combo pair, but as fate would have it, this one took the mom's melee and not the dad's health. Still, it was a female, so she got to stay and joined the others who were already raising. With another generation underway, I took flight towards the metal-rich mountain, with plans for an industrial forge on my mind. I brought out my Anki and Argent and began stockpiling massive amounts of metal I'd need for crafting it. And the new quality of life update let me set the Anki to harvest only metal, a total game changer. After draining the first mountain, I soared towards the next, hitting the second peak just as hard. Back at base, I dumped the load across all my forges and got another feeding trough down as well, as I still had piles of berries lying around from my latest harvest. But before I could light the forges, I needed more wood, so it was off to the edge of the redwoods with Chucky to strip the forest bare. With all the wood gathered, I loaded it into the drop box and pushed it across the forges. Seconds later, they roared to life, flames crackling as they began churning out metal bars. Next, I set my Anki to now only harvest flint and flew it up to the hilltop above my cave where loose stones were scattered across the landscape. Before long, I was hauling back a load of flint that I would immediately put to use for cranking out more spark powder. With it going, I grabbed the Ascendant long neck rifle I pulled from the cave the day before and hopped on Razorback. The goal, hunt down a Utyrannus, an essential essential tame for any boss fight strategy. But first, I made a quick detour, scooping up another wild sheep to serve as mobile mutton. As we soared past the wyvern trench, an alpha wyvern caught my eye. It was tempting to try my luck with my new rifle, so tempting that I even tested it on a nearby chalico.
800 damage.
Oh baby, that's a lot of damage coming out this thing.
But ultimately, I made the wise choice to move on. Unfortunately, the snow biome was still absolutely freezing. I made a quick pit stop, crafting a handful of torches to try and stay warm, but they didn't do much. So change of plans, I needed to secure another tame first. On the way, I detoured into a large canyon where a plethora of Spinos populated the waters. I saw this as a golden opportunity to reach level 80 and finally unlock the industrial forge. So I went to work, clearing the river of Spinos using my long neck rifle and letting the experience roll in. After one final kill, it was done. I was level 80 and unlocked the primitive forge, which was the primitive workstation's equivalent to the industrial forge. Running low on rifle ammo, I kept the hunt alive with my trusty shotgun, still chasing down Spinos across the winding river valley. The goal wasn't just survival, it was progress. Before long, I'd cracked level 81, but I wasn't done. Level 82 and the chemistry bench was the real target. While in the hunt, Glaceon helped clear out a nasty group of predators near a yellow ring drop. Inside, a fresh pair of flak pants, sturdy and stylish. Eventually, a level 120 Spino gave me the final push. Level 82 and the alchemy table, the primitive station's chem bench, was unlocked. With that out of the way, I reached the water cave I had discovered in my early days here. This time, I was hunting for a new ally, an otter. With the snow biome's deadly chill, I'd need its warmth wrapped around my neck if I was to survive the cold. After several plunges, I finally spotted one gliding low in the water.
There's one right there. Oh my gosh, there is one down here. There's one right there. I saw it. I knew I saw a freaking otter shadow. Oh my gosh, it's like hidden down here. Get one of these fish. This is going to ignite the entire fish army to come after me.
But Glaceon, eager and unhelpful, kept harvesting the fish before I could drag them to the otter. Between that and my slow movement through these deep waters, this clearly wasn't going to work. I'd need a better approach, either bring my beaver for help or gear up with scuba from base. So I took off, grabbing a yellow drop on my way home, which apparently offended a nearby Equus.
An Archelon saddle. Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't... Oh, whoa, what's going on here? Oh, a freaking horse.
When I arrived home, I found 3 more baby bison had finished raising and were ready to join the herd. The next morning, I grabbed my scuba gear, determined to finish what I started in the water cave. On the way though, temptation got the better of me. One purple drop, then a yellow, then another purple, and another yellow. At this point, my mission had taken a backseat to full-blown loot goblin mode. Finally, I snapped back to focus and dove once more into the cave. This time, I turned Glaceon's companion mode off to ensure it wouldn't spoil my task. It took a good bit of swimming around before I spotted the otter again, but eventually I found it.
Oh wait, there it is. There it is. Oh, the bubbles. Look for the bubbles. Okay.
From there, I began plucking fresh fish out of the water with my pike and feeding them to the otter to form our bond. After a third feed, the otter was tamed, and I named him Mr. Scarf. With my new shoulder warmer secured, I cryopotted Kitty Softpaws and set my sights back on the real prize, the Utyrannus. I flew into the snowy peaks once more, but even with Mr. Scarf, the air still cut through me like blades. Then, just as I began to regret coming here, I spotted it, a Uti. But as I looked closer, this one wasn't quite strong enough. The hunt through the cold would have to continue. The search carried into the cold morning air. I kept close to the border of the snow, scanning every ridge for the beast I needed. Then I saw it, a level 135 Utyrannus. Of course, nothing in these parts comes easy though. The Uti was locked in a fight with a pack of wolves, and if I wanted this prize, I'd have to intervene. I raised my long neck and opened fire on the wolves, keeping my soon-to-be war commander alive. But this Uti had a death wish. It barreled down into the valley, right into the middle of a herd of mammoths and woolly rhinos. For a moment, I thought it was done for, but I wouldn't let it slip through my grasp without a fight.
I'm literally gonna have to escort my dude through a oh, there's no way. Brother, you messed up. Pick your fights more wisely. What a flippin' legend this is, dude. what a great freaking bonding moment. Nice. It's not over yet.
I fought side by side with the Uti, and somehow, when it was all said and done, the snow was littered with fallen giants. With them out of the way, I raised my rifle again, this time loaded with tranq darts, and began firing on the Uti. After a short chase, the great beast fell into the snow. I scrambled to work gathering materials and crafting spiked walls to shield him, but trouble came fast. Another pack of direwolves lunged out of the blizzard, tearing through Glaceon before I could fend them off. I did eventually though, and with the danger handled, I finished surrounding the Uti and slapped a tracker on it. Then I set out in search of sheep for taming fodder, when by pure luck I stumbled across the very same one I had dropped days ago.
No way. No way. No shot. The sheep is still here. I dropped this sheep here days ago, and he's just bugging out on the floor here. That's awesome, dude. That makes this so much easier. I offered the Yudi the fresh lamb, and its taming bar quickly climbed to the halfway mark. I then stuck around until finally the taming was complete, and after everything it fought through, I expected it to be a beast of unmatched strength, but when I checked its stats, it was surprisingly average. When I returned home, I was greeted by progress. My boss bison pair had bred again, and one of my baby bison had finished raising. This one carried the good melee from its mother, so I immediately paired it with the high health male. After setting them together, I took a moment to repair my battered boots and unloaded all of the loot I dragged back from my adventures. I then took a moment to give my shouting Yudi a fitting name, Wars. Not long after, the first new bison baby arrived. It was a female, and at long last, it carried both of the good stats I'd been chasing. 45 melee, yes! We got the combo! It's a female, but it's got the combo. The second baby followed soon after, also a female, though it lacked the stat combo. Still, I chose to raise them both. With them raising, I turned to another task. I set up a drop box near the forges, pulling out heaps of cooked metal and charcoal, and transporting them to storage. It gave me just enough metal to finally craft my primitive forge, though I was still short on oil, crystal, and polymer. So I took a quick trip up the shore to harvest oil from the beach bodies of Basilosaurus. Then it was on to the crystal mountaintop, my pickaxe striking against the rocks under the open sky until I had all the crystal I needed. Oil was still a bottleneck, so I returned to the spot from earlier. This time I dove beneath the waves with scuba gear on, hacking away at oil rocks once again for the precious black goo. I returned home with pockets dripping of oil. Now all that remained was polymer. Thankfully, I remembered the clutch of poly plants still waiting in my cave. Harvesting the last of them gave me more than enough to craft what I'd been waiting for, the primitive forge. One by one, I unloaded the old forges, emptied their bellies into the drop box, and picked them up for good. Then I set the new forge in place and started smelting down the last of my metal. But metal was only part of the plan. I began crafting electronics needed for the alchemy table, only to realize I was low on pearls. So I headed back to the beaver dams. Looting them is always risky business, but I had Glaceon by my side to gang tackle any angry beavers. Clean them out, boys. Clean them out, boys. They're gonna mow these beavers down. Take them down, boys. Heck yeah, dude. But there is only so much beaver a fox and his friends can handle, and eventually Glaceon grew tired, falling victim to the beaver onslaught. It was time to head home anyway, as my baby bison with the stat combo was ready for its first imprint. Considering it might make it into my final boss army, I wanted to make sure it was imprinted. With that done, I took what pearls I had gathered from the dams and began crafting more electronics. It was progress, but I was still short on what I'd need. So for now, I switched to another plan. I grabbed every available piece of ghillie armor I had, as well as some bug spray and rare flowers. Then I crafted the one piece I was missing, ghillie legs. If I was going to bring bison into the final battle, they'd need sweet veggie cakes to keep them alive, and for that, I needed honey, which meant it was time to tame some bees. I flew out to a spot where I knew they could spawn, and sure enough, I spotted a queen buzzing around unaware of my plans. I slipped on my ghillie armor and sprayed myself down with the bug spray. The tame went smoother than I possibly could have imagined. Boom! That was so easy. Oh, that was so easy, dude. Not long after that, I spotted a second bee. A saber-tooth tried to interfere, but once it was handled, the bee was mine too. Boom, another one acquired. Then another one high up on a cliff, but nothing a little reckless parkour couldn't solve. Never doubt him. Never doubt him. He'll figure out the way to parkour up. We in there! We got another one, baby! With that area spent, I turned my attention to the nearby swamp, where I would find more bees than I could have ever dreamed of. Oh, crap, there's one right... Oh my gosh. I think there's two. Oh, there is. There's at least two, maybe three. There's one right there. Oh, there's four! There are 4 bees here. Okay, let's get to going, baby. Boom, got it. That's 2. That's 3. This is crazy. There's so many. There's 4. Oh. What's going on? Why are my bees getting attacked by other bees? What's going on? This is bee on bee conflict. No, my bee got killed by other bees. Jeez, man, bee on bee crime. Got it. Got it. Look at all these beehives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 beehives now. Once home, I set my new hives at the back of the base, each one stocked with rare flowers to fuel the flow of honey. With that done, I turned my attention to expanding my other resources. I crafted more tree sap tabs, then stopped by my garden to clear out a harvest, making space for fresh crops to grow. As I finished, the perfect bison called for her final imprint. From there, I gathered up a stockpile of chitin and headed out towards the Redwoods Island, where I began placing my new tree sap tabs. But a towering Dinotherium had other ideas, charging in to interrupt my work.
Bruh.
Why does it fall down like that? Why is that the way that this thing dies? Hold on, no way. That is the craziest way for an animal, for a creature like that to pass out or die, whatever. Oh my god.
With the threat neutralized, I was free to finish my work, securing the new taps high among the trees. The real challenge though was reaching them. I began the painstaking process of constructing thatched scaffolding, rickety platforms that creaked with every step but stretched high enough to let me service the taps. By night's end, a second tree stood scaffold as well, and my tree sap empire was ready to take off. From there, I set out into the deeper redwoods, searching for an Archaeopteryx. The canopy was alive with danger, every shadow holding something with teeth. After a long sweep, I finally spotted one, but before I could make a move, I had to fight off the predators lurking nearby. I tracked it down again after it darted off, only to find it had a stronger mate nearby. I crafted a bola on the spot, pinned it down, and knocked it out. But then, as if summoned, an even stronger Archaeopteryx swooped in. I knocked this one out with one dart to the face and fed it the chitin. After a brief babysitting session, it was tamed. I brought it home and it was named Flappy Bird. While back at base, I was met with an even bigger surprise. My perfect bison was fully raised. I wasted no time pairing her with the male in hopes they would give me a son who had both stats as well. With them doing their thing, I turned my focus to the water. The next mission, tracking down an ichthyosaurus. I scoured the coast, spotting a few along the way, but every one of them was low level. For what was ahead, I needed something more reliable. My ichthyosaurus hunt would have to wait. The perfect female bison was giving birth, and it turned out to be a pretty good birthing.
Oh, Bay twins! Twins! They're level 213 though, which... Wait, that's actually higher than this. Okay, could still be another breeder. 46, 45. Okay, it got the 2 stats we need, which means this one also got it, but please be a male. Please be a male. Oh, it's also a female. Oh no. That's fine, because now we have 3 females with the stats, so as soon as we get a male, we've already got 3 perfect females.
With the herd growing faster than I could keep up, things were getting out of hand, so I began shifting my other females off to the side, clearing out some of the clutter. Not long after, my 2 melee strong females gave birth as well. One calf was a female, but without the perfect stat combo. The other, though, was an absolute monster, the kind of bison I'd been waiting for.
All right, come on, ladies. You still have a chance. You could still give me the perfect stat combo, babies. I believe in you. I believe in you. 245. Shoosh. This one has to have the stamina, too. And it's a male. Come on, baby. 46, 45, 54. Boom, baby. This is a beast of a bison. Holy crap. 46 health, 45 melee, and 54 stamina, and it's a male. We've got our perfect male. We could start breeding.
By evening, I began organizing all of my females into a proper breeding line, especially now that a perfect male was raising. Eventually, my newest 2 bison had matured a little bit, and I could get the 2 I had been raising back out of cryos. Now they're on the same imprint timer, meaning I won't have to make multiple trips back to do imprints. The rest of the night was spent in a blur of shifting and reorganizing, moving bison after bison until finally I stood back to admire the results of a neat, uniform line of breeding ready ladies, standing proud and waiting for their future. The next morning was spent back in the waters near my base, resuming the search for a dolphin. Before long, I spotted one worth taming.
Ooh, a 130. I'll take that, baby. That's good enough.
I quickly carved some mutton off a nearby herd of ovis, but just as I began feeding the dolphin, a swarm of mantas showed up to ruin the party. In the chaos, I accidentally struck the dolphin, resetting the tame. I would manage to fend off the stingray attack, but at this point, the dolphin had retreated further out into the ocean. Things only got worse when I slipped from Razorbeak's back and found myself face to face with a high-level megalodon. Somehow, I fought it off, and after catching my breath for a moment, I dove back into the water to once again feed the dolphin. Despite the rough start, my persistence paid off. Before long, the dolphin was mine, and I could leave the open ocean waters behind for now.
No! Get back here! Where are you going? It's leaving me! Don't do this!
Once I got back to base, I released the newly tamed dolphin into the waters of my base and named it Flipper. The tame had cost me dearly though. My riot arms were broken, my chest piece nearly destroyed, and the repair bill was hefty. To offset that, I invested 2 skill points into well-oiled machine, reducing repair costs by 20% for now. Reaching the next tier would require me to craft 25 adobe structures, something I wasn't ready to do at this moment. Instead, I mined a quick load of metal from the rocks above my base and forged a saddle, ready to take my new companion out. After checking in for the first imprints on my latest calves, I mounted up and spent the rest of the night skimming the deep ocean floor floor outside my base, jumping off Flipper to scoop up any pearls I could find. By the time I returned home, I had enough pearls to craft the last of the electronics I needed for the alchemy table. With that squared away, I set out for the mountaintop once again, this time bringing my Anki along for richer crystal yields. All that remained now was polymer. Luckily, I still had some hard poly tucked away in storage from earlier drops. With that, I was finally able to craft the alchemy table, placing it neatly where my mortar and pestle had sat. Now it was time to focus on those adobe structures. I unlocked the adobe half wall, figuring it would be the simplest structure to mass produce. For that, I need cactus and sand in order to produce clay, so it was off to the desert. The trip didn't come quietly. On the way, I stumbled into not one, but two death worms. With the fox pack at my side and my shotgun in hand, we managed to bring both beasts down. But just when I thought the danger had passed, another death worm surfaced. It tore through my fox squad, and with my shotgun ammo spent, I had no choice but to retreat. Eventually, I found a patch of unguarded cactus and harvested what I needed, along with breaking apart the desert rocks for sand. On the way back from the desert, I stumbled upon a red desert crate. Sadly, it didn't hold anything game-changing, though a normal red drop did yield a riot shield, something that might come in handy when it comes time to face the Ice Worm Queen. Once home, I got to work crafting clay. To my surprise, the yield was far more than I expected. I'd completely forgotten how generous each craft is. I proceeded to turn it into adobe quarter walls, and when the last one finished, the task was complete. I had 3 more skill points, allowing me to unlock the final tier of well-oiled machine. Just after that, the bison I had been raising were ready for their final imprints, locking them in as strong contenders for the future boss fight. Then I spent nearly the rest of the day back in the deep seas gathering pearls. This time I ventured into the trench where I had once collected oil. I returned with an okay haul, enough to at least patch up my battered gloves if I wasn't also short on polymer. By this point, the bison were nearly done raising, so while I waited on them, I crafted more gunpowder, and then I turned what gunpowder I already had into simple bullets. Once the new gunpowder finished, I crafted even more, and then I used those to craft more shotgun shells alongside some rifle rounds. By the time the last bullet was pressed, the moment I'd been waiting for arrived. The bison finished raising. I moved the females into the line and began the careful process of walking the perfect male down the row a little bit at a time to breed with all the ladies. Once he was finished, I parked him off to the side to rest and recover. I knew I'd need more cryopods if this operation was gonna continue, so I crafted what few I could. Soon, the first batch of babies hit the ground. 3 of them came out with the perfect stat combo.
245, these are both, this is definitely perfect. And it's a female. 245 female. 245 male. Okay.
The second wave followed not long after, giving me even more perfect bison. The failures had to be cleared away. It was harsh, but necessary to keep space free for cryoing the third wave. When the third batch came, it brought with it one that stood out immediately.
222, probably not. 250? Oh my gosh, what do you have?
By the end of the night, I had them all separated, the good from the bad. I counted them up, and if we included the perfect ones we've already raised, I already had enough bison for the boss battle. The morning began with a grim chore, culling the weaker bloodline. Every low-level bison that didn't make the cut had to be taken out. Once that was done, I stored the good babies, now all tucked away in cryos, safely inside the smithy. With 19 mouths to feed, I needed more berries than ever, so I crossed the water to the nearby island. This time, I saddled up the perfect male bison, not just to harvest berries, but to put his strength to the test.
Just hammered him down right as he's out roaring. Get back up in the sky. Get back up in the sky. I'm with way too much fun with this. Get up in the sky!
It took some time to master his strongest attack, but once I did, there was no doubt this army was bound for great things.
Oh my gosh, it did 1,000 damage. That's the attack you should be using on the run. Oh my gosh, could you imagine? Imagine if each one, and that doesn't have any kind of pack bonus, any kind of anything. This is literally just one by itself.
Back home, I dumped all the berries into the drop box and distributed them across the troughs. With food secured, I released all 19 babies, filling the base with the sounds of their little stomps as they began to grow. So with the herd raising, it was time to step away for a new mission. I stocked up on weapons, cryoed Flipper, and prepared to leave, though not before snagging a red drop on the way out that contained a much needed saddle.
Okay, a little machine gun. Is that Yudi saddle? Nice, a Mastercraft Yudi saddle. Oh, sweet.
Next, I went after a purple drop only to have it blink out of existence right in front of me.
No, 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 no. No, you suck. Why is it always the purple ones, man? Oh my gosh.
After a long flight across the map, I finally reached the ocean's edge. I tossed Flipper into the water, cryoed up Razorbeak, and slipped into my scuba gear before descending into the depths. My destination, the Tuso Pit. Down here, the artifact of the Devourer rests at the ocean's floor, tucked into a trench swarming with Tusos.
Oh, buddy, there already are some down here. Oh no, there's 2 right there. Oh no, this is not gonna be as easy as I'd hoped. I really thought I'd just be able to grab it, get in there and get it. Oh, there's the artifact right there. Okay, actually, they're pretty far away. We might be able to just do this. I don't see any super close to it. There's 2 over there, but I don't see any like super close. We're going for it. Here we go. All right, ready? Pucker up. Oh, there comes one. Oh my gosh. Okay, they will swim up. I did not know they would swim this high. Screw it, we're going. Let's go. Come on. Go, 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 go. Get out, get out, get out. Go, go, go. Baby, we gotta go. In and out like it was nobody's business because there's really not that many close. That was not that bad. All right.
With one artifact in hand, I turned to my next challenge, the Wyvern Cave. Again, I would approach by water, sliding Flipper in carefully, and praying the wyverns overhead didn't notice. It took a while to navigate the cavern's twist, but eventually I docked towards the back of the cave where the artifact lies. Megalanias blocked the way, and soon one sank its teeth into me. Mega rabies spread through my veins, and though my health drained fast, with over 500 health, I survived easily. I pressed on and got bit again. This time, I barely held on through the sickness. Finally, battered and weakened, I reached the pedestal and claimed the second artifact. Before leaving, I grabbed a stash of organic polymer from nearby plants. I left the Wyvern Cave behind and set course for home with 2 artifacts tucked away safely. When I finally touched down at base, the bison were ready for their first imprints. Caring for them took far longer than expected, each calf demanding its turn. To keep them all synced, I crowd each one up after its imprint, planning to release them together so they'd stay on the same timer. And once they were all cared for, I turned my attention to the volcano. There, I harvested heavy chunks of obsidian I would need for crafting more artifact pedestals. Back at base, I did just that, using the obsidian to craft 2 new pedestals, which I placed proudly atop my base, setting the freshly claimed relics into their stands, where they glowed majestically. With that done, I grabbed my otter, stuffed any fur armor I could find in my pack, cryoed my 2 already raised perfect bison, and crafted a torch. It was time to head into the snow in search of a winter drakeling. I didn't have to search long. Almost immediately, I found one tangled up in a fight with some mammoths. Thankfully, they lost interest, leaving me just enough time to light my torch and begin the taming process.
You stay over there. Gotta track this drakeling. Torch should have tracked it, right? Only level 20. Oh, wait, okay. Taming progress. Okay. Wants crafting experience. Okay. Oh! Alright. Nice. Once again, kill experience, baby. You came to the right place. Daddy is ready to slay. What do you think about this? Look at me harvesting. Yeah, you liked it. Boom! Oh, that's an explorer note. Oh my gosh, we have to go. We have to go. We have to go. Holy crap, we gotta go.
Seeing an opportunity to use the XP boost, I rushed to the desert, planning to farm death worms while the XP buff lasted. The only problem, not a single worm in sight. By the time the bonus faded, I'd found nothing. Of course, the moment it was gone, I stumbled onto one, and then as the night closed in, I found another. Both fell to my weapons, but the wasted boost stung all the same. The morning hunt kicked off with another death worm, and when it fell, it granted me another level. On the flight back towards base, I spotted both an Alpha Rex and what I thought was an Alpha Carno, 2 prime targets I'd have to return to later for the experience. Back home, I spent a good chunk of the day imprinting on the bison herd. Space was becoming a real problem inside the base, so I had to start shifting some of the calves outside just to make room to move. Among the chaos, I finally gave my winter drakeling a proper name, Snowflake. Later, I transferred the experience Snowflake had already earned to one of my bison, and holy hell, the boost was insanely overpowered.
Oh my gosh. Holy crap. This is a cheat code. This is how we're leveling our bison. Oh my gosh. This is how we're leveling our bison. This is insane. And this was only because this was a low level one. Like, if this was a high level one, it would have had more experience and it would have like instantly leveled this bison up.
By nightfall, several of the bison had finished raising, but I had a new objective in mind. I wanted to find a high level drakeling, something stronger than Snowflake. The higher the level, the faster they gain experience. I figured I would go search for something other than a winter drakeling to see if each season gave its own explorer note boost. During my search, I diverted to grab a green ring drop just for the heck of it, and inside were some really good raptor saddles and some pretty good blueprints. Completely useless at this point, but still impressive. The next day, I spotted a high level Rex locked in a battle with a herd of Brontos. For a moment, I considered taming it, thinking it might serve well in the ice cave, but then something even better caught my eye.
It was a level 5 Bronto. Oh, there's a drakeling right there. There's a drakeling right there. Hold on. Spring or summer one, maybe? Oh my gosh, it's impossible. There's a one. I don't know what it is, but it has a 1 in front of it. It's a 1 something. Come on. Oh, nice. Harvest experience. Okay. Easy enough.
This one being a much higher level, I would have to prove my worth to it a few more times before it was tamed, but eventually the job was done.
There it is.
And it's tamed, brother. Once the job was done, I tested its experience gain by taking out a few Spinos. The results were solid. It definitely gained more, but not the overwhelming leap I had expected, considering the level difference. Still, I wasn't about to waste the opportunity. With my new beast under control, I set my sights back on the alphas I had spotted earlier. On the way, I equipped my Drakeling with the Lost Colony skin.
Nice, dude. Bro's looking frickin' monstrous.
When I finally reached the spot, my plans hit a twist. That so-called Alpha Carno I'd marked earlier, it turned out to be nothing more than a normal Carno that had been gnawed on by a Cerrado. So I shifted focus to the Alpha Rex instead. I lured the massive predator into the ocean, trapping it where it could barely maneuver. Then, from the safety of my mount, I unloaded shot after shot into the beast. It was a long, grueling fight, but eventually, the Rex collapsed.
Oh, we did it! Holy crap, we just killed it. Nice. 18,000 experience. It went up. It went up 15,000 experience for killing that thing. Oh my gosh. It took almost every bullet I had, but we killed that 130 Alpha Rex and got a bunch of experience now on the Drakeling, which we just got to keep going though. I want to make sure I get that Drakeling all the way up.
With that dealt with, I returned home and began reorganizing the herd, moving my boss bison outside to free up space and cryoing as many of the extra ones as I could. With things thinning out, I turned my attention back to the endless grind for metal. I cryoed my Argent and Anki and began another metal run. But first, before heading out, I took a moment to officially name my newest Drakeling, Wilted Rose. That's when I realized something important. Leveling the Drakeling directly increases the percentage of XP gained from its transferability. Wilted Rose had a staggering 43 levels sitting unused. The potential was insane. With that revelation, I got back to business, first hitting the smaller hilltop deposits before moving on to the richer mountain veins. Along the way, I had my Enki gather obsidian as well, stockpiling it for crafting future artifact pedestals. Once the first chunk had cooked in the forge, I prepared to craft a new batch of cryopods, but realized I had dropped all of my organic polymer when I cryoed Razorbeak.
Oh no, I dropped all the organic polymer when I cryoed the frickin' thing. Oh, what a fool. Oh no.
Thankfully, I still had some hard poly left in storage, which was enough to craft a few pods. As more metal finished smelting, I shifted focus to ammunition, churning out another round of simple bullets. The stockpiles were growing, and with Wilted Rose's power waiting to be unleashed, the army was only getting stronger. Once the simple bullets finished, I converted them straight into more shotgun shells, ensuring my firepower stayed topped off. From there, I loaded up the forge with wood to burn down into charcoal, stockpiling it for my ever-growing need for gunpowder. With supplies rolling, I set off towards the desert, Deathworm country. On the way, I found myself running the numbers behind the experience gains in my head.
I think it's going to give me at least 4,000 experience per Deathworm. That's my belief. My belief is a Deathworm will give me at least 4,000 experience. Just doing the math, if the one that had like 30%, the Deathworm gave like 1,200, now we're at 140%. You got to think that's, 60, 90, that's at least 4. It's got to give at least probably 4,000 to 5,000-ish experience per Deathworm.
It didn't take long to find my first worm. One kill granted a sweet 4.6k experience. I quickly tracked down another, and as it fell, I noticed something surprising.
Why is he healing so fast? Does it have a healing? Oh, because the freaking Drakeling heals this. That's amazing. So I could literally just sit here and farm it because I get the Drakeling will keep healing my Griffin for the damage it takes from the Deathworms. I'll kill all the Deathworms. I'll keep getting experience. This is literally just an infinite XP farm without the risk of losing your Griffin. You just got to keep finding Deathworms. This is insane.
Soon after that, I found a third worm only to have it slip away for a moment, but I tracked it back down and finished it off, which capped out my Drakeling's XP, and it was time to cash in. I funneled all that experience into one of my new bison, and holy crap, the sheer amount of levels it gained was absurd.
It had 5 levels. What does it have now? 47 levels. So 30,000 experience just gave it 42 levels. Oh my gosh. I'll get this up to 600 to start. Get this up to 20k. And we'll just keep pumping this. So now we got a bison with 20,000 health and 686% melee damage.
As if that weren't enough, maxing out the Drakeling's XP also rewarded me with a Dragon Horde chest. I tracked it down, and what it had waiting inside was equally as absurd.
Oh my gosh. Ascended Flamethrower, Ascendant Morel Top Saddle, Ascendant Trike Saddle BP, 24 Broths of Enlightenment, Ascendant Equus Saddle, 30 Flamethrower ammo. I don't really need these, but I'll take 28 regular kibble, which I don't need at this point either, and advanced bullets. Jesus, dude. Give me that. Let me get some more XP.
Then, before heading home, I made a quick detour into one of the poly caves, hacking away at the strange pink plants to stockpile even more polymer. The next day started with a bit of much needed maintenance. Using some of the polymer I had gathered, I finally repaired my gloves, though my chest piece was still out of commission until I could gather more pearls. With that settled, I crafted as many cryopods as my resources would allow and began cryoing up my entire boss bison army. Once that was done, it was time to hunt, specifically death worms, to level all of my bison with. After what felt like forever scouring the desert sands, I finally tracked down my first death worm and brought it down. The XP from that went straight into one of my fresh, unleveled bison, and the results were incredible. It jumped straight to the point where it was looking ready for battle. Encouraged, I kept at it. The next death worm, I decided to fight with just my rifle, which took forever compared to using my shotgun. And when I went to transfer the XP, I ran into an annoying cooldown timer, forcing me to wait. To kill time, I tracked down another worm and put it down as well. While waiting for the cooldown to wear off, I snagged a yellow ring drop. It was packed full of saddles, all great quality, but none were the elusive bison saddle blueprint I was hunting for. Finally, the cooldown ended and I dumped the last batch of deathworm XP into a bison. By the time it was done, the beast was sitting exactly where I wanted it, a war machine ready for the fight to come. The next morning, I tracked down another deathworm, but without any shotgun shells left in my kit, the fight dragged on far longer than I liked. Once it finally went down, I hauled the XP back home and poured it into another one of my bison, slowly building the army into a true boss slaying force. Later that day, I grabbed Pincushion and headed to the nearby hilltop to gather flint. The old reliable Anki never fails me when it comes to mass farming, and before long, I had a massive haul ready to be carted back. I dropped it all off at base and set to work. I alternated between crafting spark powder and gunpowder, feeding my stockpiles so I could crank out even more shotgun shells and simple bullets, something that would make taking out deathworms far easier. As I worked, I remembered the broths of enlightenment I'd looted from the dragon horde chest days ago. If ever there was a time to suck them down for a leveling push, this was it. My production line kept churning out shells all through the first half of the next day, until at last I had a healthy stock of shotgun shells. With supplies stocked, I set out once more into the sands for another deathworm hunt. The first encounter wasn't a lone worm, but a pair of them, working together in an attempt to spit roast poor Razorbeak. A few blasts later, and both were nothing but stains in the sand. The bison who received the XP gift from the dual deathworm kill got even more levels than the others, and to top it off, the XP was enough to also earn me a green dragon horde chest. Not long after, I stumbled across another deathworm, and this one too brought a friend for a good old double team, but like the others before them, they were torn apart. Still no match for my powerful shotgun. Then, as I landed to unload the XP into another bison, something crazy happened.
Oh my gosh. What the heck? How? Come on, bison, no! Alright, well, this bison's getting involved. We're doing it. We're doing it with the bison. Keep him distracted. This actually might be a good idea. Use one of my already leveled bison as bait. Well, this bison is a little extra lucky, I guess.
So with 3 deathworms taken out before exchanging any experience, this bison was going to be one of the leaders of the herd. The deathworm hunt rolled on into the next morning, and so did the grind of funneling all of that juicy experience straight into my bison. Each worm down meant another step closer to a fully leveled boss army. Around midday, I stumbled across a shy deathworm, one that clearly got a little stage fright, turning back before our fight even began, and then refusing to come out of the sand altogether. Still, I danced in the desert, blowing up the sunshine for the rest of the day. By nightfall, my efforts were paying off. I had just leveled another bison and had only 7 left to finish. As I kept hunting, I found most of my time wasn't spent fighting. It was spent just sitting around, waiting on my Drakeling's timer to expire. Of course, it wouldn't be another day of the hunt if at some point 2 deathworms didn't try gangbanging me and Razorbeak. At one point in the hunt, I stopped over to the nearby island for a red ring drop, but also because the game's relentless heat stroke was translating into a real-life headache. Like, quite literally, I was getting a migraine from staring at the screen. While I was over here, I made a quick detour to my tree sap taps, gathering the syrup so the trees could begin another harvest cycle. I'll need every drop of it when it comes time to bake those veggie cakes for my boss army. With that handled, I turned back to the desert, continuing my hunt for more deathworms. The cycle of waiting, fighting, and farming rolled on, another long day of grinding. The hunt raged on into yet another day, with me cutting through every deathworm foolish enough to rise from the sands. By midday, I had done it. My last bison was leveled up. The boss army was complete. Almost. Just because the herd was ready didn't mean I was done. No, the desert was still swarming, and I wasn't about to waste the opportunity. I stayed out there farming worm after worm, determined to max out my Drakeling's XP. Not only would that unlock a max level horde chest, but it would also let me funnel that mountain of experience into my Yudi, giving me an even stronger cornerstone for the coming battle. As the day raged on, the worms kept coming, and one by one, they fell, their essence feeding the war machine I was building. The sands were turning into my training grounds, and soon, Noon Attack would feel the weight of what I'd forged. Before long, I was slaying the last deathworm I needed. With it down, the Drakeling's XP bar filled to that glorious 30,000 experience cap.
There it is, 30,000 experience, baby!
Back at base, I pulled all my boss bison out of their cryos, checking each one for any stray levels and pumping them where needed. Then came the big play. I funneled the entire 30k experience into my Yudi. With that, his health soared past 20,000 and the rest went straight into stamina. A true battlefield commander, now ready to roar my herd through anything Nunatek could throw at it. With my army squared away, it was time to chase down the Dragon Horde chest. The first I tracked down was buried deep inside the Life's Labyrinth, far deeper than I could reach without actually running the dungeon. Luckily, it wasn't the Ascendant chest, so no real harm done. I summoned another, and sure enough, this one was the Ascendant Horde chest. Though its loot wasn't anything I particularly needed, still, you never say no to treasure. Then the next few were frustrating. Another after another, I found chests seemingly buried beneath the ground. Unreachable. But persistence pays off. With some patience and creative positioning, I managed to summon and collect from one of the buried ones, and even circled back to another and was able to pull it from a surprisingly long distance away. I started the next day by returning to one of the other buried horde chests, and once again, from a strangely far distance, I managed to summon it up. Next stop was the labyrinth chest. With a little persistence, I even got this one to spawn from above, and that was the final chest. My treasure hunt had been fruitful enough, and it was time to shift focus. I turned my attention towards cave prep. First, I grabbed a stack of curry for extra warmth, then got to work crafting 5 more bison saddles, each one essential for the squad I was about to bring underground. From there, I pulled together all of my best fur armor, knowing the chill of the ice caves would chew me up otherwise. With everything ready, I picked my 6 strongest bison and just sort of sat on them for the rest of the day, letting my Drakeling work its magic to heal them back to fighting shape. By the next morning, I had 6 bison fully healed and ready to take on their first real challenge. With my squad prepared, I set off towards another cave to claim yet another artifact. After a long ride, I reached the entrance. With my fur armor equipped, I stepped into the chill, ready to face whatever was inside. This is the Frozen Dungeon, home to one of the map's mini bosses, the Ice Worm Queen, who, once you slay her, grants you the artifact of the pack. It has 2 entrances, and the one I'm using is located roughly right here on your map. I began scouting the cave on Razorbeak only to quickly hit the no-fly zone. Of course, I had to backtrack for water anyway, and on the way, I scooped up 2 blue drops, giving me some fantastic fur armor and a fresh hatchet. From there, I returned to the no-fly zone and began working my way through until I reached a point where I could uncryo one of the bison, and then I returned to cryo Razorbeak, as I had forgotten to bring an extra cryopod. Not much further into the cave, the first deathworms appeared, but these weren't the massive terrors of the desert. These were weaker, and a single blast from my shotgun was enough to erase them. As I pressed on, the cave rewarded me with several loot drops. Sadly, none of them contained the bison saddle blueprint I'd been hunting for. Still, I pushed deeper, carving my way through the winding corridors until finally I found the spot where I would drop down to continue my journey. It took me far longer than I'd hoped to find this point, but still the Deathworm Queen was near, and so was my next artifact. I dropped down into an arena on my bison, but in my excitement, I completely forgot there was a barrier that tames can't pass. Before I knew it, the queen was already on me, and I panicked, throwing out all of my bison in the only spot I could. Problem is, I also accidentally threw out Razorbeak. Oh, you can get Razorbeak out of here. Oh, Razorbeak, no, not Razorbeak. Razorbeak was not meant for this fight. Razorbeak's dead. Razorbeak's gonna die. I'm gonna lose Razorbeak to this. Razorbeak's dead. Razorbeak is definitely gonna die. Razorbeak would eventually fall to the Deathworm Queen, but the few bison that slipped past the barrier and me with my shotgun managed to take down the massive worm. The loss of my griffin definitely stunned, but it was at least numbed a little bit by the many red drops scattered across the floor, as well as getting our next artifact. Once I had it, I exited the cave through a waterfall that dropped me straight into the canyon where I'd once hunted Spinos, and from there began the long trudge out. Finding the ramp that actually led upward took way longer than it should have, but once topside, I figured the quickest way home was straight through the snow-covered hills. The journey was long, cold, and miserable, but eventually the familiar silhouette of the hill above my base came into view. With one final leap of my bison, I was home. Once inside, I immediately set to work crafting another artifact pedestal. The morning began with a little ceremony as I carefully added my newest artifact to the top of my base, another gleaming trophy in the growing collection. From there, it was back into preparation mode. I grabbed one of my spare crossbows and stone arrows, fashioning them into a stockpile of grapple hooks I'd no doubt be needing. Next, I grabbed some med brews and antidotes to heal any sickness I might get, and then before leaving, I used a combination of my Daedon and the Drakeling to patch up my strongest bison, making sure it was in top fighting shape. With that, I climbed aboard Glacier and headed off towards my next caving adventure. By late afternoon, I had reached the entrance of the cave and began trotting in on my bison. These are the Carnivorous Caverns. They hold both the artifact of the Immune and the artifact of the Cunning, and while they have several entrances, the one I'm going to be going in is located roughly right here on your map. I began working my way in, but it was already late in the day, and before long, a problem that I wasn't ready to face presented itself.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. It is nighttime, and the Megalosaurus are awake. So I'm not about to try to work through a cave full of awake night boosted Megalosaurus. I'm just gonna have to kind of chill up here until it becomes morning time. So I did what any Viking survivor would do. I set down a campfire, found a place to sit, and decided to wait out the night by the warmth of the flames. With my loyal bison by my side, the cave would just have to wait until daybreak. When the sun finally rose, I kicked some dirt over the campfire and set off deeper into the cave once more. At one turn, I came across a cluster of carcanos, oversized crabs just waiting for the chance to snatch me off my bison. I gave them a wide berth. This cave was already torturing me enough without becoming crab food. Time dragged on as I twisted and turned through its endless passages, and honestly, this is probably the hardest cave on Ragnarok for me. I always get spun around in it no matter how many times I've done it. But finally, after what felt like the entire day, I stumbled into the bioluminescent zone. Pushing further in, I dropped down into a lower section, only to be greeted by a Megalosaurus. It lunged out of the shadows, forcing me into a desperate scramble. I managed to loop around a stone column, shaking it off for the moment, but the situation had just gone from confusing to dangerous. To deal with it, I brought out my female bison and slowly approached. It wasn't long before the Megalosaurus spotted us, but with the mate boost on my side, the fight was over before it really began. Not long after that, we found ourselves in a fight with another, but this time, the bisons packed it into a corner and bullied it into submission. With that threat gone, I pressed forward until finally, the first artifact of this cave was within my reach. Really, man, like I'm trying to have a moment where I slow walk up to get the artifact, you know, it's gonna be all cool. I'm just kind of walking in on my bison all slow, and then a freaking ant of all things has to show up and ruin it. All right, well, whatever. There we go. Boom, the artifact of the immune. That's ours. Yay, woo, cool moment. But just as when I thought I was making progress, I wound up following a path that twisted its way straight out of the cave and dumped me into the swamp. Not exactly the shortcut I was hoping for. So I regrouped, took flight on Glacier, and circled back to the original entrance. Once again, I stepped inside to try navigating this cursed maze. Time flew by, and I still found myself spinning in circles, getting hopelessly turned around. By the end of the night, I had wandered all the way back to the entrance once again, determined to try fresh in the morning. It took far too long, but at last I was on the right path and knew the entrance into where the artifact was held was nearby. Now all I had to do was find it. Flowers in the lake in the middle. I know it's over here. I just cannot remember where the freaking hole is. I cannot remember where to go up. There's a hole somewhere on the ceiling here that you can like go up through, and that's where the dang artifact is up inside of, and I cannot for the life of me remember where that flippin' hole is at. Oh wait, here. Oh my gosh, it's frickin' right here. Sure enough, as I entered up through the hole, the glowing relic was waiting inside, and with it collected, I finally put that cursed cave behind me. Now carrying two unnecessarily frustrating artifacts, I headed home. Once there, I crafted 2 more pedestals and proudly set the relics atop them. 6 artifacts now stood on display, a testament to all the chaos I'd endured so far. But there was no time to rest. I got back to work crafting bullets, sleeping bags, and shotgun shells, all in preparation for what's coming next, the Life's Labyrinth. I cryoed up Flappy Bird, grabbed some focal chili, mixed in a few stimulants just in case, and of course had to cryo up Mr. Scarf as well, and couldn't forget to grab my scuba gear. On the way out, I made a quick pit stop for some extra resources and used them to throw together a large storage box. That's when I noticed my Drakeling was nearly at max experience, which meant only one thing: it was death worm time. I found one almost instantly, but since you can't shoot off of a wyvern, I had to jump off and let Glacier tank the hits while I laid into the worm. With that handled, I returned, put away all the supplies I wouldn't need for the first half of my journey, and capped the day off with a long drink of water. And with that, it was time to enter the Life's Labyrinth, what is considered one of the hardest caves in all of Ark. It's split into 2 different sides, and on each side there are multiple puzzles that you have to solve to get through. But if you do get through, there are 4 artifacts in this cave: the artifact of the clever, the artifact of the massive, the artifact of the devious, and the artifact of the Skylord. And the one and only entrance into this cave is located roughly right here on your map. Right as you enter the cave, you're faced with a puzzle. There is a random assortment of letters on the walls, and you have to figure out what word you're supposed to spell out that opens the first door. Luckily, I've done this a lot of times over my time playing Ark, and I know the code. There it is. Boom! First stage complete. Now we launch down in. And now there's no going back. Now we either do this or we die, or we lose our stuff. We have to start over. The next stage is a series of buttons on the walls, as well as one under a statue's hand that you have to push to open both doors, which you then choose which side you're going to do first. The trick is you have to crawl, or else the statue will light fire and kill you instantly. There we go. Yeah, it's just time. You just got to do it quick enough. All right, we're through the second part. Oh man, you gotta crawl the whole way. Do not stand up. I know it's so tempting to stand up and go thinking like, oh, it's good, I'm cleared it, but you gotta wait. I go until this door shuts. I stay on my belly till this door shuts. Now I feel like I'm safe to get up. I'm not risking it until I'm through, you know?
The next stage is a simple series of parkour jumps, but should you fall, you just land in some water with piranhas that are easy enough to kill in ASA. As you continue, there are more jumps and some spikes on the floor you have to avoid, and in the waters below are capros that you're going to want to take out with a shotgun or something else. There was also a red drop in this room, but again, no bison saddle BP. Once you clear the capros, you just push both buttons on the wall and it opens the door to the next room. Then the next room is pretty simple. You just hug the wall to the left or the right and go slow. If you try to go down the middle even crawling, the statue will light you on fire and kill you instantly. You can get this loot crate again, but you have to be careful not to trigger the fire. From there, press the button on the right and the door opens up. Now for this next room, I don't really know what the actual science behind it is. There's 4 buttons, 2 on each side, and you just kind of push them randomly until the door opens. Maybe there's a pattern, maybe there's not, I don't really know. I just pushed the 4 buttons and eventually the door opened. One note is just absolutely don't go for the loot crate because there's plenty of booby traps all across the floors and you'll just get killed. Now for the worst part of this entire cave, the button maze. Essentially, there is a button that you push that opens a door further on in the maze. Then you have to rush through a bunch of other doors by pushing a bunch of buttons and getting to that door before it shuts. It's all on a timer and it's all very, very precise. You have to do it basically perfectly. I'm not going to walk you through exactly how to do this because there's plenty of guides out there that will show you how to do it, but essentially you want to get to this room first that has a column with a button on it, and then there's a button across from it. This is where you start. Now I will recommend to use Focal Chili because it will obviously make you run faster. So even if you know what you're doing, if you've done this a lot, it could still be very confusing, and if you make one wrong turn, you're basically screwed, which happened to me actually. I made a wrong turn and had to find my way all the way back to the button, but I'm not going to show you all that. I'm just going to let you watch all the way through my successful run. Try it again. Here we go. Focal Chili down. Button. Button. Go, 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 go. Right through the lights. Hug it, hug it, hug it, hug it, hug it, hug it, hug it. Okay, across here. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Picking up freaking stones. I'm picking up stones. I don't want to be picking up stones. Come on, come on. Get ready to sprint. Go, 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 go. Come on. Okay. Oh, we cooked it, man. We made it with plenty of time. We cooked! We cooked! We cooked! We made it! From there, I just dropped down the hole, and then after jumping over a few gaps, I had my first artifact of the Life's Labyrinth. There we go. The first artifact has been acquired. The artifact of the clever. Now, the next room you enter into is the sacrifice room, where you have to sacrifice a small tame or tribe mate down a hole to open the next door. And well, I could only think of one tame that I should sacrifice for this. And I figured, you know, what better tame to sacrifice than an otter? There, little buddy. All right, pal. You want to go to the right? Okay, a little bit more, maybe. There he goes. We have fire! Oh my gosh, I thought it didn't work for a second. I was like, oh no, the poor otter for nothing. The next door is on the ground and can be opened by a button that's hiding behind a fallen column. I would drop down into the water, and after avoiding another series of spikes, I found a button that opened the final door, which would allow me to reach the boss arena. And for this, I brought along my best male and best female bison to help me fight off the Spirit Dire Wolf and the Spirit Dire Bear. They start off at level 50 and are no match for my bison pair, though they are reincarnated several times all the way up to level 250, but still, they stood no chance. Once I took them out for good, the 2 artifacts they were guarding in this room were mine for the taking. Now it was time to leave the cave for the moment. I dropped down through a graded structure, made my way through some water tunnels, up a spiraling staircase, and back through a cave-like tunnel, and eventually I was back in the desert. From there, I made my way back to my storage box and grabbed the gear I would need for the other side of the labyrinth. Now, I'm not going to show you the first 2 stages of the labyrinth because it's exactly the same. I'll pick you up where things get different. So picking you back up as I just did the first fire trap, and I'm now going through through the left door instead of the right one we went through previously. From here, I would put my scuba gear on as the next portion of the maze is completely underwater. I entered into a large underwater room, and what I'm looking for is a small hole in the ceiling that'll take me to the next part of the cave. But first, I wanted to swim around and loot any crates I could find in hopes of still finding my bison BP. Of course, I did not. So after getting every crate I could find, I swam through the hole in the ceiling and moved on to the next part of the cave. And to be honest, this next portion is another one of those rooms that I'm not really sure what the exact order of the buttons is. I just always kind of spam the buttons on this middle column as well as the ones in the room until eventually the door I need to get through opens up. And eventually you make it through to another room full of buttons. Smashing random buttons in the next room would lead to times where the doors would open with Trudons in them. But eventually I got the door that I needed to go through open and moved on to the next part. This next section had a few raptors waiting for me, but they were easy work for my shotgun. Then I pressed some buttons on the center column, opening the door we need to go through, but also another door that should have some treasure in it. But when the door opened, there was a frickin' T-Rex waiting in there instead. I of course dealt with it, opened the door again, and looted the crate. Once I did that, I moved on through the door I was supposed to be going through to continue the dungeon. The next stage is a simple underwater stage where I just have to push 4 buttons in counterclockwise order, opening the next door. For the next section, I just had to make some jumps across some open gaps, of course stopped to grab a red drop through all of this, and eventually made my way to the mass of a ship that I would have to squeeze across and make a few more jumps to the next area. Now this next portion is the whole reason why I tamed our Archaeopteryx Flappy Bird. You see, you have to walk the tightrope on some beams and make some very minor jumps, but if you fall, you are dead. So the Archaeopteryx allows you to kind of float a little bit slower and make your way through. The only problem is I'm absolutely terrible at using an Archaeopteryx. Flappy Bird, brother, that was risky. What are we doing, man? I don't ever use Archaeopteryx. This is actually a terrible idea. I should just parkour this. I'm good at parkour. Oh, I'm not even worried about that red drop. Nope, this thing is a lot harder to control than I thought it was. I am not worried about the red drop at all. Eventually, though, me and Flappy Bird would make it across. We did it, Flappy Bird. We did it. Flappy Bird, we did it. Historic run, my guy. We almost died twice. Definitely almost died twice, but you know what? We're through. And with that done, I was at the artifact. There it is, the artifact of the Sky Lord, the final artifact we need to do the boss. Now, at this point, the cave is exactly the same as the other side's run. After punching Flappy Bird into the hole to get us through the next door, it's just identical to what we've already done. So I'm not going to show you a repeat process. But just so you know, I took out both the spirit animals and got the artifacts again. Once I was done with the second side, I retrieved the rest of my gear from the storage box, leaving behind the duplicate artifacts I couldn't carry. From there, I figured I should waste no time and retrieve the Ascendant Dragon Horde chest ASAP. When I summoned it, the thing decided to spawn way up in the air. Luckily, I was able to reach it from the back of my wyvern. Inside was a pile of absolutely insane loot, but once again, not the one thing I've been hunting for all of this time, the bison saddle blueprint. The following day, I dragged myself home, slow walking inside, weighed down with loot like a pack mule. Once I dumped everything, I went to craft new artifact pedestals, only to realize I was short on obsidian. So I hopped on Autumn and set course for the Redwoods Island. A few days ago, I had spotted some obsidian while flying past, and sure enough, it was waiting right where I remembered. With obsidian in hand, I returned home and crafted the missing pedestals, placing my newest artifacts alongside the rest. At last, my collection was complete. But there was no time to sit back and admire them. I had a new goal. It was time to craft the primitive cooker, so I could mass produce veggie cakes for the boss army. Problem was, I was short on oil and polymer. So back I went to the waters where I'd been gathering oil before. Diving in, I got to work chipping away at oil rocks until a couple of sharks crashed the party.
Yep, figured this was coming, buddy. Come on, man. Come on, man. Come get some, brother.
I managed to kill one, but the other shredded my scuba tank.
Oh no, that's my scuba. Oh no, dude. I mean, I'm still fast enough with the flippers so I can get away with it, but that sucks, man.
That made the next dive interesting, as I nearly drowned just trying to reach the deeper rocks. When the shark came back around, it broke my flippers before I could take it out. Even then, I pressed on, scavenging oil from the shallower rocks, because sometimes stubbornness is the best survival skill. The next morning began with the next material on my list, polymer. For this trip, I saddled up on my Argentavis, choosing it over my wyvern since it could fly longer, carry more weight, and let me just sit back and watch the scenery roll by. Midway through my trip, I diverted briefly for a red drop, but of course nothing is ever simple. A whole colony of bees had already claimed it, and when I approached, chaos broke out.
Why are there so... Oh, they're gonna come after me too, aren't they?
Oh my gosh, it's just like literally a freaking colony of bees migrating across the land together. Oh gosh. Woo, they got close. Surely I can get this. Oh, nope, bee. Oh, there I go. Alright, that's it, you're dying.
It has another UD saddle, and it might be better than the one I have. You never know.
When I finally reached the polymer cave, I wasted no time. Every last bit of polymer the cave had to offer went straight into my Argent's inventory. Then came the long, slow trip home. By the time I finally approached base, the day was coming to an end. I had just spent an entire day flying back and forth for one material. The long journey paid off though. I finally had the resources to craft the primitive cooker, the modded version of the industrial cooker. I set it upstairs alongside the rest of my kitchen gear, then tucked a water tank behind the stairs and an intake running down into the water. With the plumbing sorted, it was time to bake some cakes. First step, stimulants. I got more spark powder cooking, then hopped on one of my bison to gather a mountain of stimberries. Soon I had enough stimulant bubbling away, but I wasn't done yet. Turns out I was still short on fiber, so back out I went, stripping every bush I could until my arms were sore. With fiber handled, I swung by the redwoods to collect another batch of sap. Once I hauled it back and transferred it over, I realized I was still about 200 short of my goal to make 10 cakes per bison. Veggies at least weren't a problem. I had plenty. Another bottleneck though was honey. My bees had been working overtime, but they didn't have enough time to crank out the full amount I needed. Still, I began dumping every jar I could fit into the cooker and got the first batch of cakes underway. And there I stood for the rest of the night, feet planted in the kitchen, baking cake after cake. Cake baking duties continued into the morning until I was completely out of honey. Running the numbers, I figured I'd have just enough to give each bison 6 or 7 cakes. A few hives had managed to produce more though, so I squeezed out 3 extra cakes before taking a moment to run the numbers again to determine if I had enough time to let my hives produce more.
Yeah, I need 380 total veggie cakes to have enough, I think, right? No, why would I need 380? Oh, I need 380 honey. Wait, what am I doing here? Okay, so hold on. I need 190 veggie cakes to have enough, right? Right now I have 60, 127. 190 minus 127 is 63. So I still need 63 veggie cakes, which means I still need 126 honey. I just don't have it. I should have got bees earlier. I should have got them earlier. That's all there is to it. I messed up. Okay.
Moving on, I prepared to craft saddles for the remaining bison. First though, I needed to craft more paste for them. But after getting the paste made, I realized the bottleneck was another material.
Oh, hide. I'm short on hide. I'm short on hide. Oh no. Oh no.
So for now, I just queued up as many saddles as my supplies would allow. When I realized the last piece of the puzzle was hide, I set out to gather what little I still needed. Unfortunately, Wilted Rose had other ideas, chewing up the bodies before I could fully harvest them. Once I got her calm, I took down one final Bronto for a mountain of hide. With that, I crafted the last 2 bison saddles, finally completing the set. My herd was now fully equipped for war. But of course, good soldiers need good names. And as usual, I posted in my community tab on YouTube asking you all for suggestions. Then I put your names on a spin wheel to let fate decide. Here is what you all came up with. Bully Boss, Martin, Taurus, Hornrietta, Elk Page, Goodbye Sun, Bicycle, Bye Bison, Bovina, Big Buff, Steve the Wondrous Good Boy, Mark Buffalo, Moolissa, The Milkman, Ragnareker, Fluffy, Buffy, and Betsy. By this point, I was about as ready as I was ever going to be for the boss fight, but it was only day 98 and rushing into battle just didn't feel right, so instead I crafted a few gravestones. I flew up to the hilltop above my base, a quiet place overlooking the ocean, and there I dug graves for 2 of my fallen companions, Razorbeak and Flappy Bird. Planting their stones into the ground felt like the least I could do to honor them.
Here lies the 2 casualties of this adventure here in Ragnarok. Razorbeak, who our trusty steed, our trusty flying mount that took us all around this map for the majority of this playthrough, and unfortunately fell to my own error of just kind of throwing out cryopods like crazy. Razorbeak, you didn't deserve to die the way you did. I'm sorry I did it to you, and I don't think I'll ever be able to forgive myself. Flappy Bird, you were a necessary casualty to complete this mission, and your sacrifice was very much appreciated. We needed you to do it, and you stepped up and did it. You were tamed. You were added to the team for one mission, and that was to get us through one small part of one small dungeon, and you did it, and then you gladly laid down your life so that we could complete our mission, and we thank you for that. And these are our only 2 tames that we lost in this playthrough, our only 2 tames that we will be remembering, and we will miss you both dearly. Thank you.
From there, I didn't do much of anything. I just sat in the chair for 2 whole days, staring out at the sea like a weary Viking chieftain before his final battle. My mind wandered back through the saga of this journey. The first time I saddled up Autumn and felt the wind rush against my face. The long nights delving into caves where one wrong step meant certain death. The desperate clash with wyverns high above the frozen peaks, and the endless duels with deathworms beneath the desert sun. I thought of Razorbeak and Flappy Bird, brave companions now laid to rest, and the fox army that fell more times than I can count. And of course, the bison, the countless calves I bred, raised, and sometimes sacrificed in the pursuit of a perfect herd. Every triumph, every loss, every scar etched into the land and into me led to this, my final battle, my final victory was near. At long last, the final day had arrived. I rose from my chair and picked it up. I knew exactly what had to be done. First though, some last minute preparation. I ground up more spark powder, turned it into gunpowder, and while that cooked, I gathered a stash of med brews and a handful of shadow stakes. Then I pulled out one of my ace in the hole weapons too, a powerful assault rifle I just looted a few days ago. Next, I loaded up my Argentavis with stacks of sweet veggie cakes for the herd. Meanwhile, the gunpowder finished, and I forged it into advanced rifle bullets. I hoped I wouldn't need them, but there's no such thing as too prepared. Then it was time. I crowded up the entire bison army and my Yudi, double checked everything, and just barely remembered the most important items of all, the artifacts to summon Nunatek. From there, I grabbed the bullets fresh off the press, figuring 400 would be enough, and headed out. Storm clouds raged overhead as I approached the red obelisk. The sky itself felt like it was bracing for war. One by one, I unleashed my bison, filled their saddlebags with veggie cakes, and pumped the last of their points into raw melee power. When it was all set, I began the ritual. The obelisk roared to life, the battlefield shimmered into view, and then the fight began.
All right, we're in. They are in fact courage. Just do it one more time just to be safe. Go on, boys. My boy had to take a poop. Go on now, squad. Get in there. Oh, deathworms are in. They should absolutely mow these things down, though. Now, the thing is, how do I get him down? How do I get him to come down?
Nunatek refused to land as it flew around the battlefield, and I thought maybe I could clip its wings with a few shots from my rifle.
Come on, brother. I need you to get down here to fight my guys. I want to see what they can do.
I'm not sure if I have to do enough damage to him to get him to land, but I just kept firing away in hopes that it would prompt him to come down.
Come on, brother. You got to land eventually. Eventually, you have to come down here and face the music. Here he comes. Here he comes. All right, he's down. He's down. Come on, boys, get him. I'm holding way too much aggro, guys. I'm holding way too much aggro right now. I'm not a fan of it. Oh, gosh, he's cooking. Get him, boys. Come on, boys, get him. Oh, they're cooking him. They're actually cooking him. Dude, they're going to destroy this thing. Holy crap, they're going to destroy it. He doesn't stand a chance. He's floating on their feet. Oh, he got a little bit of a bite in there. Oh, he's aggroing to me, maybe? No? No? Come on, boys. I'm roaring you on. I'm giving you the courage. You've got this. Keep him away from me. He can't get to... Oh, there he goes. Up in the air. Okay. Good work, though. Oh, he's eating the worms. Hey, that's cheating.
Eventually, I came to the conclusion that you have to shoot him to do enough damage to get 2 waves of ice worms to happen. Once those are both gone, he would start landing.
They're not getting him grouped up like they were earlier. This is actually kind of bad. They're not getting him grouped up. Come on, boys. You got this. If one of these guys starts going down, it's like, oh, no. If they start falling, it's an oh, no moment real quick. Oh, they're looking fine. They're not even hurting, bro. They're so okay. These guys could probably do higher difficulty. It's a call to the worms to come and save its butt. But my bison are gonna make them... Jump shot. Jump shot. Jump shot. Jump shot. A lot of damage is happening. I'm seeing a lot of damage numbers on my... Well, okay, the yellow ones are going away. It's just you and them. Come on, boys, get in there. What's that bison doing? Just standing there. They got him underneath. They got him above him. They're under him. Well, there's still a worm left. Come on, boys. You got this. You got it, boys and girls. Come on. Oh, he's hitting me. Oh, back up. Back up. Come on, Buff. Come on, bison. 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 Here we go. It's easy. Easy mode. It's down. Easy as they come, baby. Bison took it down with no struggles. I'm pretty sure they're probably all very well. They also had veggie cakes. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget that they were using veggie cakes. I will take that trophy, baby. Okay, so this one did eat 8 veggie cakes, and it's got 18. It's got 2,000 health gone. Or no, they only had 6 veggie cakes on them, huh? So that one only ate 6 veggie cakes. That one ate, yes, or they all ate about 4 veggie cakes probably, and they're all probably pretty fine on the health department.
Back home, I crafted a trophy mount, hoisted the head of my slain foe above the front door, alongside the flag of victory, a fitting end to 100 days of blood, sweat, losses, and triumphs. That concludes my 100 days journey here on Ragnarok, everyone. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who watched this video through to the end. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it, and if you did, please don't forget to hit that like button on your way out, leave me a comment down below, and if you haven't already, subscribe so you won't miss the next adventure. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, keep it crispy.